Merlin was the strongest demon king in the world, yet the laziest. He had to retire from his position to pay off all his accumulated debts and decided to move to the human continent. Merlin ran from his responsibilities and hid his true power, pretending to be a normal person capable of nothing, until he became famous in the city as the worst lazy, unemployed person. Merlin Lucifer was our hero now. Merlin sat in his palace writing his weekly report when suddenly an unexpected human army, known as the Church Squad, attacked the palace and fought his demon soldiers. His little sister Lilith went down to deal with the situation and used her dark gravity magic to make her enemies fight each other. But there was one human soldier whose will was very strong and completely resisted her magic. This soldier was Alice, hero number 233 in the Land of Light. Lilith was shocked and finally understood that her gravity magic did not work on women, so she decided to take a more direct path. She tried to joke and seduce Alice, telling her she wanted her in her statue collection. But before she got far, Alice drew her sword and started a full battle with her. Alice was the only one able to injure her, which made her think that the hero of this generation was nothing special, just ordinary. Her words angered Alice greatly, so she retaliated with force and drew all the power of her legendary sword. Lilith did not take it seriously and attacked the sword with her hair strands, which were made of dragon strings, but the sword cut right through. This showed just how dangerous the legendary sword was. Later, Alice mounted Lilith and used her magical powers to shackle Lilith's hands and legs. With the defeat of Lilith, the human soldiers celebrated their victory and cheered together. And this sound reached Merlin. Merlin exploded with rage, threw his papers aside, and decided to intervene himself. At the same time as the enemy's defeat, Alice became confident and decided to challenge the Demon King. She went to the leader of their squad, the legendary wizard, and asked for permission to march on Merlin's palace. But the legendary wizard insisted that he would kill the Demon King himself, the king who killed countless human soldiers and heroes throughout the years and caused the failure of all their campaigns every time. Then he revealed his final weapon, a war machine shaped like a whale with unimaginable power, and ordered it to destroy everything in its path. She objected, saying they did not need to go that far, but the legendary wizard was determined. He wanted to erase all demons, believing that was the goal of a true warrior. He activated the whale, which opened its big mouth to launch a destructive magic plasma beam, intending to burn the demon soldiers instantly. At that moment, Merlin Lucifer came out, stood in front of his soldiers, and easily protected them from the attack without a scratch. Merlin pulled his hair and began extracting his energy, then descended to the battlefield and landed directly on Alice's head. It was an act of pure defiance. Lilith immediately hugged her brother, complaining about the cruelty of the humans who annoyed her. Alice, who was still trapped under his feet, tried to slide out from beneath them. Eventually, Alice managed to escape from under his feet and started shouting and complaining, but Merlin ignored her completely. He asked Lilith who that chatty girl was. Lilith replied coldly that she was a lame hero sent by the kingdom to hunt Merlin. Merlin ran toward Alice to look closely at her pretty face. He gave her a quick smile, and then, with a touch of a finger, he sent her flying far away. Joking, he said the Land of Light clearly chose heroes by chance, and he did not even need to draw his sword to defeat them. The only thing that caught his attention was the flying whale above. He said maybe that whale could ease the pain of his cursed heart for at least 2 days. Then the legendary wizard appeared before him and told Merlin he came to repay the insult from the previous campaign. Merlin looked at him in surprise, asking what insult and what campaign and who he was anyway. The wizard tried to remind him, stating he was the sole survivor of the last battle, considering it a great achievement. Merlin finally remembered him and asked if he was the coward who wet his pants and cried to be spared, promising to send more soldiers as a gift for target practice. These words struck the soldiers like lightning, and Alice could not believe their leader stooped so low and sold them out like that. The wizard broke down and started denying the accusation, calling Merlin a liar while shaking with terror. In a desperate attempt, he gathered all the magical energy of his soldiers and transferred it to the whale to increase its power 1,000 times. But Merlin did not see it as worthy of moving a single hair on his head. Before the whale could attack, Merlin drew his dark sword and, with a single strike, sliced the whale in two, destroying the entire plan. The wizard fell down. He fell to his knees again, and this time he grabbed Merlin's legs and began to beg him to spare him, throwing all the blame on Alice, claiming the attack was her idea. Suddenly, the palace bell rang, reminding them that the time for the Seven Kings meeting had come, and Merlin remembered he had not written his weekly report yet. He grabbed his hair in terror and ran back to the palace quickly, leaving his soldiers standing in shock that the terrifying Demon King feared paperwork and reports more than anything. Alice tried to stop him in the middle of the road and said, "Wait, we are still in the middle of battle." Merlin finished it with a single sword strike, wiping out all humans from the battlefield in a second, and Alice was the only one who barely survived by protecting herself with a shield. He returned to the palace and entered the meeting with the rest of the Demon Kings, and everyone Everyone knew he had made no progress in the land of darkness. No profits, no achievements, and not even a report. Merlin tried to defend himself, asking, I just defeated an entire army of humans and destroyed a flying giant. Isn't that work too? But no one cared. They told him they wanted numbers and profits. The palace needed money to run, not corpses of enemies. They began comparing his achievements to theirs, and it turned out he was the only one who did nothing but laze around. They named him the worst demon king in history and decided to cut his budget for the next week and scolded him until he exploded, saying, I am the one who killed millions and protected the first palace alone, and I am the reason you are all still alive until now. No one can do what I did. But the others were unmoved and told him that every time he entered the battlefield, he caused terrible devastation. The King of Lust pulled out a long paper listing all the destruction Merlin caused. He damaged the pipelines 31,000 times, and since all this cost a lot, they deducted it from his salary. The biggest shock was revealing he owed the kingdom 66 trillion, which was the real reason he was afraid of paperwork and refused to resign. He was trapped. He could not resign or escape. He had to work to pay off the debt. After the disastrous meeting, Merlin decided to escape, saying he would leave the palace forever and flee from the debts. As he tried to leave without anyone noticing, Lilith appeared and startled him. He told her about his legendary plan, that as soon as he disappeared, the others would know his value and beg him to return. He started laughing and imagining his legendary return, but Lilith remembered he was fired, while he insisted he resigned himself to treat his cursed heart, which was shrinking every moment. This curse actually existed, but it was clear he used it as an excuse. The only thing that relieved the pain temporarily was fighting strong enemies. Merlin said he would travel the world looking for the strongest opponents to lift this curse once and for all. Lilith believed him, but remained insistent that he should not leave, knowing her brother could not live a single day outside the palace because, frankly, he knew nothing other than fighting. Merlin suddenly dropped a bombshell and said he owed 66 trillion to the rest of the demon kings, and if he stayed here any longer, he would have to work until he died to pay off this debt. The moment Lilith heard this astronomical number, she immediately flipped and decided to kick him out, telling him to go find a new job and not come back until he brought the money to clear the debt. Back to the battlefield, Alice pretended to be dead so she wouldn't be seen by Lilith, who was walking as if on a picnic amidst the ruins, imagining that everyone had evaporated from the battle and no one was left except Alice. Naturally, Lilith noticed her. Indeed, Lilith saw her and thought she was dead, saying to herself, what a shame, a face like this going so soon. Since Lilith had the strange hobby of collecting figurines, she thought about taking Alice's corpse and making it part of her collection, but she was heavy and the armor would tire her, so it would be easier to just take her head. As soon as she tried to finish her off, she moved. Suddenly, Lilith collapsed with laughter, saying she knew from the start that this girl was acting. But this time, Lilith did not intend to laugh. She intended to punish her for embarrassing her in front of her brother. Alice knew she had no chance, so she ran. Lilith, of course, loved the game of cat and mouse, so she released 2 wolves after Alice to hunt her down. At the same time, Merlin had reached the coast, wanting to cross the Demon Sea to escape from this continent. From afar, he rejoiced as soon as he saw boats left over from the Grand Wizard's army. But the moment he reached the harbor, he discovered that all the boats were destroyed. He finally understood that the strike he used earlier to wipe his enemies from existence was the same strike that bombed all the ships. The problem was that demons did not know how to swim, and even the idea of walking underwater was difficult. So Merlin was stuck and did not know how to get off this island. He had a small boat, but rowing the distance of this sea was too heavy for him, and he was not in the mood. Suddenly, who came running toward him? Alice, terrified, with wolves behind her. She felt her end was near, and here she remembered the words of her teacher who always told her, don't be a hero. You are still weak. You won't know how to face non-human fighters. Back then, she did not listen to him. She wanted fame and to be a hero. Besides living with her teacher in snowy mountains made her feel she would never see the prince she dreamed of. But now, in the midst of death, she understood he was right. The world was very terrifying. Alice said, let me live just this time. I promise I will not come out again until I am strong. Enough. She gathered her power and succeeded in killing one of the wolves, but the second transformed into the true demon form and wiped the floor with her. While on her last breath, she cried and screamed, saying, I still want to love and marry and have children before I die. At that moment, the lazy hero Merlin descended from the sky and transformed the terrifying wolf into cute little puppies. Merlin looked at Alice, and a devilish idea came to his mind. He thought, I will make her my slave and use her for free labor. He told her sarcastically, I saved you twice, so technically you are mine now. Pay the debt and become my slave. Before she could object, he picked her up and threw her into the small boat he had. His plan was to make her row instead of getting tired himself. Alice sat crying over her luck, saying, I came to kill the Demon King, take glory and fame, and marry the handsome prince. Now I am holding a piece of wood and rowing like a slave. As for Merlin, he stood on the boat posing like a farmer, but acting like a king, telling her, consider yourself lucky. Pocky, it is an honor for you to be my slave, Alice muttered, saying, my honor? But this is slavery without a salary or vacation. Yet she continued rowing and said angrily, I will repay this insult manifold. Just wait until we reach my country. She began venting all her anger into rowing and sped up the boat insanely. The waves were high and the boat was rocking, but Merlin stood still. Alice looked and found his feet were glued to the boat to keep his balance. The day ended and night fell. Alice was already very exhausted from so much rowing, while Merlin suddenly pulled a stove out of nowhere and cooked a hot meal for himself alone. While smelling the scent of the food, Merlin asked coldly, why did you stop rowing? You are the most failed hero I have seen in my life. Alice lost her temper and could not believe such a rude being existed in the world. She endured a lot, but she snapped, grabbed the oar, yelled at him, saying, I am sick of you and I am done, and threw it in his face. To get her back to work, Merlin offered to give her some of his food. At first, her pride did not allow her to agree, but her stomach grumbled, so she agreed and sat down to eat. Suddenly, she found the food unnaturally delicious, to the point she started crying, saying, I really have no character. You are my teacher from now on. But the smell of the grilling meat attracted some sharks. Out of fear, she ran and threw herself into Merlin's lap. With a single look, Merlin terrified the sharks so much they fled like rats. Alice stood confused, saying to them, why did they run suddenly? Merlin seized the opportunity as usual and told her arrogantly, because in the entire ocean, the strongest creature is me. But she did not believe him and said, man, I heard there is a sea monster living here. I hope it does not appear. Suddenly, a bad smell wafted, so she said to him, we used to paint our ships with legendary dragon dung, so monsters would not come near. As soon as Merlin heard this, he understood why his army smelled rotten. Alice kept giving him a long, boring speech that this dung was more precious than gold. But the problem was that this dragon disappeared a long time ago. Merlin's eyes shine. If this was true, he could sell dragon dung and pay all his debts without working. He took out a crystal connecting him to demonic beasts and revealed that he actually owned the legendary dragon and named it Pocky. Merlin rejoiced and decided he would use Pocky's dung to pay the debts. But suddenly his hand slipped and the crystal fell into the sea. Merlin did not know how to swim, so the idea was lost, and he was forced to continue the journey with Alice to the land of light. The ocean suddenly went silent. Not a single fish swam. Merlin understood a big monster was near, and suddenly the sea monster appeared before them. Merlin, as usual, did nothing and said, I do not know how to swim. Alice took the initiative and stabbed it with the sword, but there was not a single scratch. On the contrary, the monster got angrier. Merlin tried to convince it to take them to the shore and achieve something in its life, but the monster replied by spitting. Then the monster started sucking in all the water to swallow them. The boat was breaking, and at that moment, Merlin finally grabbed his sword. With a single strike, he cut the monster in two. Alice stood shocked, saying, so you are truly arrogant and rude, but oh my god, you are truly a powerful being. The rest of the journey went smoothly. As soon as they reached the beach, Merlin sat sighing, saying, how exhausting this journey was for me. Alice exploded at him, saying, you did nothing, you liar. He told her coldly, what do you mean? I guided you wisely. Without my orders, you would not have reached land. Rudely, he told her, you are slow and a failure, and not fit to be my slave. Consider yourself fired. Alice burned with rage and told him, what, you rude person? I do not want to see you again anyway. She turned to leave, but Merlin called her again and said, wait, I need you for something. When she stopped, he suddenly stripped her broken armor off her. Alice stood shocked and embarrassed, but Merlin said coldly, do not misunderstand. I am just selling the armor. I have no money, and you must pay the price for me saving your life. Before the monster then took off running, leaving her hanging in the middle of the road. In the palace, his sister Lilith sat, laughing, sure that her failed brother would come crawling back to her after seeing the difficulty of life outside. As for Alice, she returned to the city, and the surprise was that she was dragged to court like a criminal. The judge announced, telling her she was the cause of her soldier's death and also lost the mithril armor that heroes inherited for generations. The sentence was stripping her of the hero title and paying a compensation of 50 million gold. Alice tried to defend herself, saying the armor was stolen by the demon king, but no one believed her. The sentence was executed. A whole year passed, and she was now on a ship fighting pirates much stronger than her to save the mayor's daughter. The pirates were excited to kill her, but they kept laughing at her weakness as she feinted with the sword. Just when they were about to finish her off, a surprise happened. Suddenly, my friend, a man, descended from the sky like a rocket and landed on top of pirates of the holy tier rank, crushing them with his feet without noticing he flattened them beneath him. The man stood confused, asking where those pirates were. Alice looked at him and said, man, you are standing on them with your foot. Here it turned out this wasn't just anyone. This was Merlin himself, disguised as a human. But what he came for was that his heart ached from a terrifying curse, and he wanted to entertain himself with some blood to relieve himself before he started. He stood politely and said to the pirates, sorry guys, it's not personal. Then he drew his sword, and with a single strike, wiped them from existence. This strike didn't just wipe them out, it created shockwaves, the set that blew up the backup ships waiting as support. Alice still didn't know that. He was the Demon King because she hadn't seen his face before. Her mind wandered, and she began dreaming that this mysterious man would be her romantic knight. She walked toward him slowly to see his face, but Merlin flew away like Superman before she reached him. Immediately after, the newspaper brought a live report on the incident, stating that the entire rescue fleet was wiped out by a mysterious criminal known in the country as Nightblade. She snatched the mic from the announcer and said, "He is not a criminal, guys. He is a hero. He is the one who saved us from the pirates." She began melting, praising him. "I have never seen a swordsman this smooth. I admire him very much." Anyway, Alice returned home and found she had collected another 250 gold, making her savings 100,000 gold. She rejoiced, saying, "There, that is perfect. I only have 4,999,000 gold left to finish this debt." She stood shocked and said, "I am stuck in a huge disaster." She cursed Merlin, saying, "He didn't just ruin my reputation, he drowned me in a debt I can never pay off in my lifetime." Angry, she hit the table and spilled water on the mission papers, coming from the guild. While reviewing, she found a mission with a 5,000 gold reward, requiring the capture of a man begging from people in the south. Of course, who was that? Merlin, with his provocative smile drawn on the paper. Alice started to doubt, then said, "No, the Demon King couldn't possibly stoop to the level of a beggar sponging off people." Anyway, she left the papers, and before leaving, she looked at a picture of Nightblade's back to Merlin himself. For a whole year, he had been registered as a wanted criminal. What broke his pride was not that they were chasing him, but that the reward was only 5,000 gold, a trivial amount that made his image crumble. He sat planting an aura until his stomach growled from hunger. He stopped acting and started telling us his miserable luck. His big plan to sell the mithril, armor, and become a billionaire collapsed. He spent all the money in a few weeks. Since then, he lived by swindling and sponging off people, just surviving. As he walked, he found a small town and decided to enter it, but before he entered, two thieves stood in his way. Before they could say, "Hand over what you have," Merlin pulled an Uno reverse card on them and said, "Hand over what you have." The thieves stood confused, wondering if this was a thief like them or what. He told them, "I am broke, but leave the sword." The thieves got greedy for it and said, "Hand over the sword." Merlin laughed and said, "If you show your cheap faces, they won't exist anymore." Of course, the thieves mocked him, saying, "What is this terror?" One of them started showing off, cutting an apple with style. The one next to him was impressed, but Merlin, the strongest swordsman in the world, was not moved one bit. He decided to show them what real art was. He grabbed the young guy, stood him behind him, and drew the sword. The big man was cut in half and turned out to be a disguised ogre in reality. The young one was shocked and turned out to be an ogre too, but he ran away terrified, dropping the apple. Merlin took it and ate it normally and continued his way to the town. The escaped ogre returned to his king, the Ogre King, and told him what happened. The king considered it an opportunity and broke the peace treaty with the humans. But actually, this was his plan all along. He sent his kids, disguised as humans, to provoke people. Now that someone finally fell into the trap, he declared war. He ordered his soldiers to loot the town and take the women and children as slaves. On the other side, that night, Lilith received a message from Merlin writing that he was living in grandeur in the land of light, a huge palace and hundreds of servants. In reality, it was a tent and 2 rams. He told you. He also said he was very popular, and women were chasing him for autographs. But in reality, they were bounty hunters wanting his head. He reassured Lilith that he was happy and would not return unless the other Demon Kings sent him a formal written apology. Lilith was happy with his words and said, "Thank God, I will not die worrying about him." As for Merlin in the town, he entered a shop and finished off its bodyguard. The shop owner was tense when he knew who was in front of him. Merlin stood and told him, "Look at my face closely. I am the king of pride from the first Demon Palace." The man looked and said, "You are the southern beggar." Merlin was shocked. His entire image was destroyed because of his trivial adventures. The man started screaming, saying, "The southern parasite is here." In seconds, the whole world gathered around him. Merlin ran while yelling, saying, "I am not a parasite." While walking, a child saw him and told him, "You look very cool. If you do a show, I will give you money." Merlin stood trying to show off a bit in front of a small kid, but at the last moment, he pulled his hand back and did not draw the sword. He pretended he did not want to risk hurting the boy, but he felt he had done enough of a show. As usual, he asked for money, demanding 10 gold. The boy was not easy. He told him, "You are a scammer and a failure. Instead of tricking people, go look for a job, you useless person." Merlin was annoyed by the rudeness of the boy, who was only 12 years old, so he snatched the ice cream from his hand and threw it on the ground. The boy screamed at him and said, "You are a demon." But Merlin did not take it as an insult. On the contrary, he smiled and said, "Yes, I am indeed a demon," and walked away, leaving the boy behind. At that moment, a carriage stopped in front of the place, and Alice got out with some adventurers. She was now on a mission. One of the group wondered and said, "How was Alice stripped of her hero title?" While he was still asking, The man who bought the armor from Merlin turned out to have written a new book and advertised it in front of people. The book narrated in detail how the Demon King enslaved the hero Alice and tortured her physically and psychologically. It seemed this man heard the whole story from Merlin while he was selling him the armor. Alice stood shocked, saying, "What is this nonsense?" She tried to convince the girl with them in the team that this talk was a lie and did not happen. But the girl believed the man selling the books and told her with pity, "Don't worry, everyone has a past. They want to forget." She had a breakdown and said to herself, "So this is what they call social life." She fell into depression from the scandal, especially when she learned that the book sold more than 5 million copies. After trying to recover from the shock, the group went back to focusing on their next mission, hunting a goblin gang living in a cave near the village. But suddenly, the couple in the group announced they would get married soon. Alice's heart immediately sank, and she said, "Oh no, unknown characters talking about marriage and retirement means certain death for the drama." They kept talking about their happy future, and she tried to silence them so they wouldn't increase the bad omen flags, but she failed. Alice walked away and decided to focus on her private mission, finding the southern parasite. Who was who? Merlin, of course. At the same time, Merlin was sitting in a tavern, ordered everything on the menu, and ate it all. After finishing, he tried to sneak out, smoothly without paying, but the place's manager, Martha, caught him. Merlin quickly flipped it into an excuse and said, "I wanted to apply for a job here with you." He started lying, saying, "I am a graduate of the Royal Academy. I have terrible skills, and I never had debts." Martha was not convinced and told him, "You are not even fit to work as a waiter here." Merlin played his trump card. He used a skill he had taken from the ruler of lust and started dancing. The disaster was that this dance was actually from the anime's opening song. Martha was very moved and took back her words and even started feeling she might marry him. She agreed to employ him and told him the wage for this shift is 1 silver coin, plus 15% commission on drinks. Merlin, who was joking, found himself suddenly excited for the work. Martha told him to start work at night and remembered to remind him that the price of the food he ate would be deducted from his first salary. After that, she introduced Merlin to her son Henry, and the shock was that it was the same boy Merlin had fought with over the ice cream. This time, Henry could not open his mouth because his mother was standing there. Henry took him to the room, and on the way, Merlin tried to appease him and said, "Look, I will teach you the finishing. Strike with the sword for free if you forget what happened." Henry refused and told him, "You don't even know how to hold a sword. The only hero I definitely want to learn from is Nightblade, the Knight of Justice." Merlin puffed up with pride and told him, "I am Nightblade himself." The boy looked at him with disgust, kicked him into the room, and slammed the door in his face. On the other side, the adventurer team that went to attack the cave goblins was completely surrounded by the goblin army and was about to die. Who would have expected that? Surely you didn't expect the girl would be killed, so her lover had to make a deal with the goblin wizard to save her. Back to the tavern, Merlin, who was still new to the job, was half working and half slacking. It was true he served orders quickly, but the customers wanted to hear the classic talk of, "Here you go, sir. Enjoy your drink." Merlin did not care and told the customer, "Thank God I am serving you myself." Strangely, he only shouted at men, but as soon as he saw a woman, his heart, he changed into a very respectful waiter with them, distributed free cake, and put on shows for them. The tavern turned into a chamber of love. All the women admired him, and the men left with spite and burning hearts. Still, Martha, the owner of the tavern, was extremely happy because her drink sales hit the roof. She praised Merlin and told him he was a performer of heavy caliber. Merlin naturally puffed up and said he must record these words to show the other rulers who thought he was a nobody. But as he was talking to her, Martha told him that all the girls in the city were talking about him and left no subject other than him. So she had an idea to seize the opportunity and publish his news in the newspaper. As soon as Merlin heard this word, his heart dropped because he knew if his photo was published, his reputation as the most dangerous demon king would be ruined and tarnished. He begged Martha and told her, "Keep it between us, milady. I want to live quietly without noise. I promise to serve every customer faithfully." These sweet words captured Martha's heart to the point that she might have actually fallen for him. But the big problem was that her son Henry could not stand this situation at all. The boy felt Merlin was a parasite sitting on the sidelines who would become a new father to him, and this he would not let pass. So he warned him, saying, "If you think of touching my mom, I will beat you to a pulp." Merlin laughed on the outside and showed that he was kind, but inside he wanted to give the boy a beating to teach him manners. Later, Alice was walking in the city looking for the vagrant she was chasing, until she heard Henry hitting a tree and saying loudly, "I will show you, you vagrant." She went to him and showed him the wanted picture. The boy did not understand anything and did not notice Merlin's evil smile in the picture. He told her, "Oh, he works in my mom's tavern, tricking women into drinking. He earned half the year's profits in just a few days." But she did not believe it was him. But the village men themselves came and told her, "Take some gold and beat him because he took our women from us." Alice agreed and went to the tavern to investigate. She found the place turned upside down. All the women were screaming and clapping for Merlin, who was acting like Dizzy, the magician, and performing an over-the-top salsa dance. Although his eyes were hidden, his smile was the same as in the picture of the wanted man. At that moment, Alice confirmed he was indeed the Southern Vagrant, but she did not want to cause a big scene because she knew he always managed to escape. She decided to approach him quietly, but suddenly the lights turned on her, and Merlin saw her. At first, he did not recognize her and asked her to dance with him, but after a while, he remembered she was the lame hero he had, enslaved a year ago. At the same time, Alice realized this was not just anyone. This was Merlin, the Demon King himself. Fear paralyzed her, but as soon as she remembered what he did to her and how he ruined her life, she drew her sword and tried to stab him quickly in the face. Merlin, as usual, dodged all her strikes and told her, "Calm down, girl, we were old friends." But she replied and told him, "You are not my friend. I want my rights." Merlin went crazy and told Alice, "Tell them the truth." But she kept crying and saying, "Return my armor." The tavern closed to resolve the situation, and Martha's heart also broke, thinking Alice was his ex-girlfriend. She told him, "Solve your problems with her first." Merlin got annoyed and told her, "Enough tears. If anyone deserves to cry, it is me, not you. You ruined the show and dragged my reputation into the mud, and I did not even get tonight's tips." But Alice saw what she did as right and told him, "Return the armor and I will leave you alone." Merlin did not comprehend and told her, "That was a gift from you because I saved you several times. Even if I took it from you, that is my right. Your country pillaged the land of darkness for years." She did not care. She just wanted the armor to return it to the kingdom and pay off her debts. Merlin simply told her that he sold it for tens of millions and spent the money. Coldly, he told her, "Do not worry, it was junk." Anyway, she got angry and told him, "I will arrest you if you do not return my armor." Merlin laughed an evil laugh and said to her, "You are joking. With one strike, I killed the sea monster and scared your country's fleet to the point they put dragon dung in their boats. Do you think yourself or anyone here can arrest me?" Alice knew he was right and threw down her sword. Alice told Merlin that she owed debts to the country of about 50 million gold. Merlin was very impressed because all last year he only owed a few thousand golds scattered here and there. But reaching 50 million was crazy to him. But what Merlin did not realize was that it was all because of him. With a broken heart, she began explaining to him how the kingdom threw all this burden on her because of the armor that he stole, and she was forced to join the Adventurers Guild and take very dangerous missions to collect money and pay the debts. But Merlin did not care. He ignored her tragic story and focused on the word Adventurers Guild. He asked her seriously, "Are there big rewards and legendary level enemies there?" Because he needed money and also strong opponents to survive, and he could not let this opportunity pass. He asked her to teach him how to be an adventurer. After knowing the steps, he tried to appease her, saying, "We are old friends. Recommend me. My childhood dream was to be an adventurer." But Alice saw the lies flying from his eyes and told him to behave and leave. At the same time, Henry, Martha's son, was upset and did not want to return to the house where the despicable parasite was. Merlin kept walking around the city gate in the middle of the night, and then came the man who made a deal earlier with the goblin wizard. The man told the guard to open the gate. The guard refused at first because the rule stated no gates open after midnight. The man tried to convince him, saying he lost all his companions on a mission and was the only survivor. The guard pitied him and opened it for him, but he did not know a goblin army was hiding behind him. As soon as the gate opened, the goblins launched a full attack, and the wizard who made the deal with the man betrayed him first and told him, "Join your companions as slaves. Goblins never negotiate." Henry saw the scene and heard everything, so he ran to hide behind some bales, terrified. On the other hand, Alice went outside to calm her nerves. She kept thinking how that naked dancing demon wanted to work as an adventurer. She was annoyed, knowing it was now impossible to get the 5,000 gold they agreed on from him. Catching him was impossible, and just getting involved with him in anything else meant bigger disasters. Her only hope now was meeting the knight of her dreams, Nightblade, whom she was convinced would save her from Merlin. But suddenly, while sighing, she found the houses around her burning. At the same time, two huge goblins entered the tavern. Merlin thought they were customers, welcomed them, and said, "Welcome," but the goblins said they came to loot the place. Merlin simply grabbed them and threw them out, telling the customers no need to panic, winning their hearts again. Martha started worrying about what brought the goblins now, and remembered her son Henry hadn't returned yet. She ran out looking for him and told Merlin to handle the tavern. Merlin decided to act himself against the waves of goblins entering one after another. After finishing them off, he grabbed his sword and went out to help Martha, not out of heroism, but because if she got hurt, he wouldn't get his money. Martha was about to see her son, but the goblins beat her to it and took her to make her their slave. Henry wanted to help, but his feet were nailed to the spot, and he knew deep down that any attempt would end in his death. On the other side, Merlin walked amidst the chaos as if on a picnic. Any goblin approaching him found itself dead in a second. Alice stopped him and told him, "I am sure you agreed with the goblins to attack the village." Merlin laughed sarcastically and said, "How can a hero have such low intelligence? I am the legendary Demon King. Would I stoop to cooperate with trash like goblins? Impossible. He ignored her and walked away. Alice told him, then come, let's cooperate and save the people, and drive out the goblins. Merlin replied and told her, not for free, 100,000 gold. She was shocked and told him, how can I pay you when I owe 50 million because of you? Merlin told her, fine, then defend it yourself, and walked away, leaving her. Alice was forced to defend the village herself and began using her ice magic, taking down one goblin after another, even though they started to outnumber her, until appeared the goblin wizard and said, even if you are an elite mage, you cannot win against an entire army alone. Suddenly, a small goblin came, who had fled as soon as he saw Merlin, crying to the wizard saying, there is a terrifying monster there who took down half the warriors. The wizard used his goblin's eyes to verify for himself. People stood terrified, and one of them said he saw the beast man who looked like a goblin sending half their fighters flying at the other end of the city. The goblin Cirrus was looking through the eyes of her followers, watching what Merlin was doing. His terrifying power made her understand the situation would be catastrophic if Merlin and Alice united. She thought, no, this is dangerous for us, and decided the best solution now was retreat. Suddenly, a sharp whistle blew, and all the goblins retreated from the city. But the city was not spared. Many people lost their families, mothers, siblings, and children who were kidnapped and taken by the goblins. At that moment, a stranger appeared before them, looking very suspicious, like a goblin wearing a human form. This man offered to protect the people, but for a price. He wanted 1,000 gold. The poor people agreed because they were desperate and thought he was a strong guard from the upper class who could save their loved ones. But this fat man turned on them and told them to forget the past and think about the future, and that their families were likely already dead at the hands of the goblins. Suddenly, the one who caused all these calamities appeared and told the people that the goblins still kept their families as slaves in the caves. The guard did not believe him because he was the same one Merlin tricked into opening the gate. So everyone gathered around the man and started cursing him, calling him a traitor. The fat man also joined in and wanted to hurt him, but Alice stepped in quickly and defended him, starting to explain the situation that made the man do this. She told them, let's not blame each other. Take your weapons and follow me to save the people who were kidnapped. To prove she was up to the responsibility, she told them she was the kingdom's hero, number 233. But this made people doubt her more, because there were rumors she sold herself as a slave to the Demon King. The fat man rode the wave and said to the people, don't believe her. Let's beat both of them and avenge what we lost. Alice understood immediately that this man was a nuisance, so she punched him in the stomach and sat him on the ground silent. Then she told the people again, don't be cowards. Let's face them and save them. But no one moved, so Alice went alone. At that moment, Henry got angry and called the people cowards, deciding not to be like them. He went to help Alice and entered the tavern to take his father's old sword. And on the way, he met two huge goblins who had not left the city yet. He tried to fight them bravely, but they beat him up, and he was about to be finished. Thank God, Merlin came at the last moment, saved him, and beat the goblins while very annoyed because he was forced to work overtime to find Martha, and the goblins wouldn't leave him alone. Merlin told Henry, come on, go sleep, it's late. Henry replied and asked him, how can I sleep when my mom was taken by goblins? Merlin told him, think rationally. Don't try to play the hero while you are this weak. You will be reckless and perish. Henry told him, I know I am weak and can't do much, but that doesn't mean I sit and watch without doing anything. Alice, with her bravery, is going to save everyone alone, and even if I'm not strong like my hero Nightblade, I will go save my mom no matter what happens. This talk touched something inside Merlin. He remembered a moment long ago when he and his sister were young and trying to protect their mother. A very quick memory, but it showed that inside Merlin there was a heart and still some humanity hidden behind all his sarcasm and clowning. Merlin finally decided to drop his demon nature a bit and said, fine, this time I will not act like a demon. He went to save Martha. Before leaving, he drew a sword and told Henry he should feel honored because he would see the ruler of pride fighting for a human. But as soon as he went out, he found the city completely empty. There wasn't a single goblin. They had all disappeared. This meant he had to find their hideout. Oh, what a headache. Luckily, he heard a group talking about going to the goblin cave, so he told them coldly, okay men, I will lead you myself. But this group looked at him and said, you? No way, man. He tried to convince them he was a strong warrior, but they exploded with laughter and told him, you are nothing but a dancer shaking his hips for girls in the tavern. Henry tried to defend him and said, what is this, guys? He saved my life before and defeated 2 goblins. But still, no one believed him. So Merlin shrugged his shoulders. Fine, man. You be the leader, Mr. Fatso. On the other side, inside the goblin cave, the Goblin King was very happy with the raids they did. Their female teacher stood, bragging and saying, this is just the beginning beginning. We can loot the city anytime. The king tried to speak, but she cut him off and told him, those who take too much screen time die quickly. She warned him about two annoying people they saw before, Merlin and Alice, saying she was confident they would return, but she was reassured because she set traps no one could pass. Anyway, Merlin and the group arrived at the cave. Henry, of course, rushed in like a camel and ran inside, activating a fire barrier. Merlin entered with him very coldly, as if he didn't care about the goblins. The sorceress came out with her gang and said, surrender before you, all get burned. At that moment, the fat guy who was acting brave lost all his courage and started trembling, saying, save us, Merlin, for God's sake. Merlin sighed and said, oh, the headache. He walked into the barrier as if walking through warm steam. The goblins started clapping and cheering for the sorceress, who was happy she caught them. Suddenly, she found Merlin joining their applause, wearing his evil smile, appearing behind her like the final boss. He asked her coldly, what is making you laugh? The woman was startled and asked him, how are you still alive? Who exactly are you? This simple question caused an existential crisis for Merlin. Is he a demon lord, a waiter, or a beggar? He couldn't tell the truth because if people knew the Demon King worked as a waiter in a local tavern, oh, the scandal. So he played it safe and said, I am Dizzy, the friendly waiter. The result? Not a single woman was affected. On the contrary, the male goblins went crazy over his beauty. The sorceress got disgusted and said, enough creepiness, and drew her weapon. But Merlin approached her very calmly, held her hand and said, don't waste your men's lives. Hand us Martha. And that's it. His eyes were shining like a romantic anime hero. She almost fell for the trap, but suddenly snapped out of it and said, you think I'll fall for you? She launched her strongest fire spell at him, but not a single hair on Merlin was singed. On the contrary, he sneezed, and the sneeze reflected the attack back at them, wiping them out complete. The sorceress herself took a small tap on her cheek from him, flew like a rocket, and slammed into the distant mountain. With her fall, all the traps were disabled, and the people became free inside the cave. There were still some guard goblin kids. Suddenly the light vanished, and Alice appeared, broke the hostages' chains, cleared the path for them, and wiped out the goblins in front of her. But the disaster was the goblin king himself, secure on the throne. The old guy looked like he died ages ago, but as soon as he stood up, his power was felt. Alice sensed his level was at least magical, while she was merely elite, meaning her chance was 0. At the same time, Merlin couldn't find his way in the cave. Every time he got lost, turned left, came out right. The ruler of pride couldn't solve a maze. As for Alice, she fell into the Goblin King's hands. He grabbed her and squeezed her as if playing with a doll. He was enjoying her pain, so he didn't kill her directly. And it was his mistake, because Alice seized the moment and unleashed her strongest attack, Absolute Zero, with 3 hits, one after another, followed by an ice spike piercing his stomach. But the surprise was that the king healed himself in a second, then transformed into a giant muscular version with 6-pack abs, breaking her armor with a single punch and destroying her in a second. On the other side, the hostages escaped and met Merlin. Finally finding Martha, the first word he said to her was, where is the money? Will you pay the wage for this mission? Martha did not have time to reply. She grabbed his hand and told him to run, but Merlin was not the type to run. He liked to walk calmly. He cut down the goblins with a single strike, and everyone stood shocked by his power. One of the female adventurers who caused this whole disaster told him, please save Alice. She sacrificed herself so we could escape. Merlin debated internally, saying, what is it to us? She tried to kill us before, but he still needed her to join the adventurers guild. Martha chimed in too and told him, if you save her, I will triple your salary. Merlin got very angry when the adventurer implied he was greedy for money, so he stood saying proudly, I am not a greedy man, lady. But honestly, he literally did not think of anything but money. Man, even every sentence he spoke ended with the phrase, where is the money? The adventurer told him, look, she is trapped inside the Goblin King's hall. The hall is full of gold and prizes, and the king himself is of the holy tier rank. Then Merlin's ears perked up. Gold and a strong enemy? That was exactly what he needed to live a little longer. Without thinking for a moment, he ran like a rocket into the cave, leaving the women behind, who immediately thought he was a legendary hero risking his life to save his beloved Alice. Merlin crossed the long corridor inside the cave, broke the giant door, and entered the hall. When the Goblin King saw him, he acted like a villain and started giving that long, boring villain speech. But Merlin ignored him completely. His eyes locked onto the pile of money behind the king. The boy felt he found the treasure he had been looking for all his life, so he wiped the king out of the way, simply like someone moving a chair, and jumped onto the gold. The Goblin King was shocked. How did this boy barge in and take the loot he stole with the sweat of his evil brow? But Merlin told him coldly, shut up, kid, and cut off his left hand as if it were a toy. Then he went and freed Alice. As soon as he saw her in this state, his heart ached a bit. Not really for her, but he feared if Martha saw Alice like this, she might deduct from his wage and claim his delivery was damaged. Although she was beaten up, she was still worried about the others. Merlin reassured her they were fine, and only then did she lose consciousness and fall. He caught her and placed her gently on the ground. Then he turned his gaze to the Goblin King, whose hand was regenerating. Merlin was bored of his overconfidence. He was originally one strike man, yet he did not draw his sword, saying, "Let me see what happens." The Goblin King attacked him, and Merlin was, blocking all strikes without ruining his hairstyle. The king asked him, "Who are you?" Merlin said arrogantly, "Your trivial level does not deserve to know my name. I am Dizzy." The king felt the boy was mocking him, so he was forced to reveal his final form and began preparing for the ultimate strike. But Merlin said, "Fine, show me what you will do. Maybe you can sustain me for 2 more days." The king, before striking, offered Merlin to surrender and become his follower. Merlin exploded with laughter and told him, "Sorry, I could not control my laughter. How can someone like you compare himself to me? Even their sorceress could not withstand a fraction of my aura. And you are not even suitable food for my dragon." The king got annoyed and launched his final technique, but not at Merlin. He launched it toward Alice. Merlin coldly blocked the strike with his bare hand and told him, "You are a fraud. How do you call yourself Holy Tyr when you are weaker than my sister Lilith?" Then Merlin got bored and drew his legendary sword. As soon as the Goblin King saw it, he knew he was facing the ruler of pride himself. This was the sword that no one could wield but him. Before he could even beg for mercy, Merlin wiped him from existence and turned him to dust. Although he was weak, Merlin gained some extra lifespan for killing him, but his strike exploded the statue behind the throne, revealing another mountain of gold. Merlin entered a cloud of dreams and started imagining he reached the peak of life, but the strike was too strong. The entire mountain above the cave began to collapse. Now he had 2 choices: take the money and leave Alice, or save Alice and say goodbye to the mountain of money. The rational blue devil appeared and told him, "Take the money." The red devil told him, "Save Alice. She will help you enter the Adventurers Guild, which means more money and stronger enemies." After calculating it, he thought about the future and his interests, as well as his promise to Martha. He picked up Alice and ran with her out of the cave while crying profuse tears. Not tears for Alice, no. These were tears for the mountain of gold he left behind. As soon as he exited, Henry was the first to thank him, saying, "You saved Alice. Thank you, hero." But the tears were still falling. Martha thought he was crying over Alice's condition, but in truth, he was still crying over the money. Later in the tavern, Merlin sat beside Alice, who was unconscious, thinking, "Should I heal her or leave her? Is it not enough that I lost a mountain of gold now?" She wanted him to work extra and treat her, but if something happened to her, all his plans would be ruined, so he decided he had to treat her. But first, he had to remove her shirt to be able to treat her. As soon as he started treating her, who walked in? Martha and her son saw him in this situation and immediately thought they were dating or married. They left the room to give him privacy, while Merlin, who did not understand what was going on in their heads, continued as if nothing happened. After Alice took off all her armor, Merlin approached her with a face full of magical charm as if he was going to kiss her. But before that happened, he suddenly pulled back and started spitting all over her body. Although the sight was disgusting, Merlin's saliva had healing abilities, but it only worked on the opposite sex. In a moment, the whole room was filled with saliva bubbles, and all of Alice's wounds were finally healed. This ability was one of Merlin's ultimate techniques, so he did not intend to use it again for free anytime soon. At that moment, after Alice was healed, she entered a strange dream where she met Nightblade and started muttering in her sleep, saying, "Oh, so handsome. I love him so much." He realized that his technique did not just heal people, but also gave them strange dreams. Anyway, he did not sleep all night. He sat in her room, guarding her from any further danger. In the morning, Alice woke up and found Merlin had disappeared, and found the female adventurer waiting for her, who told her everything that happened after she fainted from the Goblin King's strike. Alice could not believe that Merlin was the one who saved her life and was deeply shocked. The adventurer told her, "Do not be sad or hold a grudge. Love sometimes has fights." Alice got annoyed and said, "Love? What love? This is just a misunderstanding. He and I are enemies to the death." But neither of them took her words seriously. In the end, the group of adventurers was preparing to leave the city after finishing their assignment from the guild. Before leaving, they thanked Alice for everything she did for them. The female adventurer did not miss the chance to tease her a bit and told her, "By the way, I was in the room next to yours and heard laughter and joking all night." Alice could not believe that Merlin was with her the whole time while she was unconscious, and she was even more surprised when she found herself without clothes. In the city, Merlin saw a crowd around a journalist who came to cover the events of the goblin battle, and there was a fat man showing off and claiming he was the hero who saved the village alone and defeated the goblins. But as soon as he saw Merlin looking at him sideways, he got scared and ran quickly before he was exposed. The journalist turned to Merlin and asked for his opinion on the goblin invasion. Merlin said with utmost confidence, "Nothing. I wiped them out with one hand." The journalist looked back at the camera, impressed, and said the miracle was that the villagers could deal with the goblin invasion with such bravery. Then she announced she would soon hold an interview with the former hero number 233, Alice. While she was talking about the bad luck of Alice, who was kidnapped before by the Demon King, then by the Pirate King, and today by the Goblin King, Merlin returned to the tavern. There, Martha told him that Alice was looking for him. He immediately immediately, thought she surely wanted to thank him and show gratitude for saving her life, which made him chuckle to himself. As soon as he entered her room, he was surprised by her attacking him with a sword while cursing him, saying, "You pervert, you demon, you lowlife." Merlin was shocked, grabbed her, pinned her to the wall, and said to her, "What is wrong with you? Aren't you supposed to thank me and return the favor after I saved you again?" But she did not want to hear anything. She accused him of taking advantage of her while she was unconscious, so he asked her to return the favor by recommending him as a novice adventurer. Alice agreed reluctantly, and thus Merlin resigned from his job and said goodbye to his admirers and even the older ladies who were dazzled by him. He also said goodbye to Martha and Henry, telling the little boy, "Take care of your mom after I leave because I won't be here to protect her." After everything was finished and settled, Merlin and Alice got on the carriage and continued the journey. Merlin sat laughing, saying how strange it was that everyone thought they were engaged or lovers. Alice, for the first time, agreed and said, "I would never be with someone like you, you cheap person." Merlin naturally got annoyed and told her, "And who would want you?" From there began their eternal bickering all along the way. At the same time, the goblin sorceress, who was still alive, found out the Goblin King died, so she decided to gather her armies and flee south to get as far as possible from that monster Merlin. But suddenly, a mysterious woman appeared from beneath the rubble. This woman, said she, took the third key of the Hell Legions from the treasure room and added that she would not leave any witnesses alive. Indeed, she killed the goblin, sorceress, and all the goblins with her in a second. Hours later, Merlin and Alice arrived in front of the Adventurers Guild. As soon as Merlin got off, he ran to the mission board to look for missions that would bring him money. But Alice grabbed him by his arm and dragged him toward the receptionist, Leticia, and introduced him to her. Leticia's first question was, "Is Merlin your boyfriend?" Naturally, this question made Alice's blood boil, so she sold Merlin out completely and told the employee that the wanted fugitive from the south, who had a 5,000 gold reward for his capture, was him. Merlin was shocked, saying, "Hey, what are you doing, girl? Are you crazy?" But Alice clarified that her intention was not betrayal. On the contrary, she believed that anyone with a criminal record could not be an adventurer, so the solution was to report him, and then he must pay his debts to have his name cleared from the record. This would happen when he worked as an adventurer under her supervision and paid it back. Leticia agreed with her, but said, "Because you found the loophole in the reward mission, I will not give you 5,000 gold. I will give you 50 only." Leticia then looked at Merlin and told him, "See how much Alice sacrificed for you." Merlin was embarrassed and disgusted to the point he wanted to hand himself over to the soldiers and rest his mind, but she held him and would not let him escape. Merlin got angry and said, "You are the reason I lost the entire treasure cave." They started fighting again in front of the guild. Amidst the quarrel, Leticia started preparing the rank evaluation for Merlin. Merlin was excited and said to himself, "I am the strongest demon king. I wonder which rank they will give me." In this world, adventurers are divided into ranks. The weakest is iron, then silver, then gold, and the highest is mithril, people at the wizard level. Merlin was shocked and said, "How are these weaklings the highest rank? I want something higher." So Leticia told, thinking he was joking, "There is a legendary rank called amethyst, but only legendary heroes reach it." Merlin's face lit up and he said, "Okay, register me as amethyst right now without even a test." But Leticia, of course, did not take him seriously and said, "This boy is joking." Then a red-haired guy named Hobbs entered. He heard their conversation and approached to see who she brought with her. After that, another one entered the guild named Arnold. As soon as he saw Alice with Merlin, his heart broke. He went down on his knee and said to her, "Marry me." Enough rejection. He kept reminding her that he was a count's son and had high status. She told him then, "Look, Arnold, I am not dating Merlin, nor do I love him or anything, and I am single." As soon as Arnold heard this word, he flew with joy and said, "Okay then, a challenge. I challenge you, Merlin. We fight, and whoever wins marries Alice." Merlin did not care and said, "I don't want her. Take her, man," and decided to withdraw. But Arnold took it the wrong way and told him, "You are mocking me? I am a count's son. I cannot take charity from one like you." He started speaking like Middle Ages poets and said, "I will save Alice from evil, Merlin." Alice naturally got annoyed and told him, "Wake up from this nonsense," and slapped him on his face. But Arnold ignored her, drew a sword, and rushed at Merlin. Merlin coldly hit him with one finger and sent him flying to the ceiling. Alice told him, "You hit him very hard, Merlin," but at the same time she was happy and said to him, "Bravo." This small move made the whole guild look at Merlin with amazement. Even Hobbs himself said he might be at the elite level. Merlin got angry and said, "You compare me to the elites, these trivials?" He was about to draw the vortex sword and wipe the floor with them. Alice quickly held him and said, "Calm down. He was complimenting you. Elites here are very rare." Merlin yielded and said, "Okay, but I will raise the guild level alone." Suddenly, a dark figure wearing a cape named Claude entered and told Merlin, "Move out of my way." Merlin ignored him, but Alice pulled him and said, "Please, Merlin, I feel this man is very strong. We don't want disasters from the first day." Claude took the evaluation test and turned out to be a wizard. The whole guild flipped out and celebrated him, saying, "Now we have two wizards, him and the guild master." But Merlin stood silent and unhappy. Finding this weakness unacceptable, any weakling took all the attention. He went up to do his evaluation too, happy because he intended to make everyone bow to his power after they knew who he really was. Merlin stood in front of the strength test crystal, and all the people were waiting to see the light coming from it to determine his power. But the surprise was the ball did not light up at all, meaning simply he had no fighting ability, nor anything that makes one an adventurer. The whole hall erupted in laughter and mockery. Those sitting in the guild looked at him with contempt and said, the boy acting like a know-it-all turned out to be a loser in the end. Worse than that, Leticia herself, the official, said Merlin could not be an adventurer at all because the ball did not light up, meaning for her, he had neither magic nor fighting power. But Merlin, with utmost coldness, went and said, the truth is I have neither magic nor fighting power. Alice was shocked, but at the same time not surprised. She knew that despite this, he destroyed anyone with one strike. She stood beside him in front of Leticia and said, believe me, this man is very strong and deserves to be an adventurer. Leticia's mind went to a whole other place. She thought Alice was defending him because she loved him. Merlin tried to convince her and told her, even the demon envoys themselves offered me the leadership of the Hell Army, and I refused. But of course, no one believed him and said he was lying, to the point that one from the back said sarcastically, finally, if there is a rank for lying and nonsense, Merlin would be at amethyst level. Merlin got annoyed and told them, bring the guild master himself, and I will show you who I am. Everyone sitting thought he was joking, but the surprise was that the old guild master, a man at legendary level, heard the talk. Before the challenge, they went to the guild arena dedicated to fighting, and the guild master sat bragging and saying, I defeated countless heroes. As for Merlin, he did not care. He sat, cleaning his ears and digging out wax. Disrespect in this way drove the guild master crazy, and he told him, if you can move me from my place just 1 inch, I will consider you the winner and you become an adventurer. Merlin took permission to release all his power. A second later, he struck the vortex sword, destroying the arena completely and making the streets around the guild ruin. Alice was praying secretly that he wouldn't kill the guild master by mistake. The explosion was massive to the point people thought that the guild master was the one who did it to teach Merlin a lesson. But Merlin came out from amidst the destruction standing like a hero and said to Alice, don't worry, I didn't hurt him. I still need him to testify to my strength. A little later, the guild master came out from inside, terrified and trembling, telling Leticia to bring him new clothes because he ruined his. The result? Merlin was officially registered as an adventurer, but at Iron Rank, despite wiping the floor with the strongest person in the guild. Alice tried to console him and told him, be happy, you are the only exception who became an adventurer even after failing the test. Merlin started planning and calculating it wrong as usual and told Alice, we will do 100 missions a month and earn tens of millions of gold, and I will control the entire adventurer market, and I will give you 10% of the profits as generosity from me. Naturally, she got annoyed and told him, get out of my face, Merlin. Merlin walked away cursing because she didn't know her own interest. In the end, he found himself hungry with no money even for food and no place to sleep. The result? He stormed Alice's house. While she was in the bathroom, she heard him enter, rushed out, slipped, and her towel fell off. It was a deadly embarrassing situation. Afterward, she found Merlin sitting very coldly on the sofa, eating her food and telling her with utmost shamelessness, what you have is worth monitoring you for, actually. He tried to soften his words and said, I came to live with you to protect you, but this protection comes with a small protection fee, 1,000 gold a month. Alice grabbed him and threw him out of her house immediately. He stood behind the door, nagging and saying, how can you be cruel to me after all I did for you? I have nowhere to go. The neighbors gathered and thought that. Alice used him and sold him out, so she was forced to open the door for him again quickly so she wouldn't expose herself further. As soon as he entered, he ran up to her room and said, I will live here starting today, and since we are friends, I won't charge you a protection fee. Alice tried to kick him out and hit him with her sword, but he kept dodging until they ended up on the bed. The next day, she went to the guild fuming and suffocated, telling Leticia and Hobbs, this guy stormed my house and made me sleep on the floor. My back is broken. Hobbs told her, you are too nervous, Alice. Calm down a bit. This talk made her even angrier. Merlin came right after proudly and said, Alice and I are living together now. Everyone was shocked and thought they did everything. Even Arnold, who loved Alice, held on to her and said, even if he reached the third base, I still love her. Arnold himself demanded a second confrontation with Merlin, but this time not with swords, but an adventurer confrontation. Whoever won would get more points. He picked a mission from Class A, which was eliminating a huge number of zombies in Denbashi. Merlin didn't care until he learned the reward was 5,000 gold. Immediately, he said, I will take this mission, but Leticia stopped him and said, you are still Iron Rank. You cannot take the mission mission alone. Merlin went and told Alice, "Come join my team," but she said, "Impossible." Arnold seized the opportunity and told her, "Come with us. I brought Claude, a legendary level adventurer, and we will split the 5,000 equally." Merlin, of course, offered her and said, "Come with me, and I will take only 10% from you." But she chose Arnold's team just to spite Merlin. Merlin was then confused about whom to find. The solution? He kidnapped Hobbs, carried him while drunk, and he woke up later finding himself in a carriage heading to Denbashi. Hobbs asked him, "Why did you bring me here?" Merlin told him with utmost coldness, "You begged me to bring you along, but you were wasted and don't remember." Merlin reassured Hobbs, saying, "Don't worry, I have experience with these trash monsters like zombies and such." At that moment, the Rose Knights appeared in front of them, also on their way to Denbashi. Hobbs told them that this road was rough and carriages couldn't pass, advising the knights to continue the rest of the way on foot. But the knights told him that was impossible because they were guarding the daughter of Duke Rose, who couldn't walk. Merlin, with utmost coldness and disrespect, asked sarcastically, "Is the Duke's daughter disabled or what?" Then the knight, Commander Kyle, tried to whip Merlin as punishment for insulting the Duke's daughter. But Merlin grabbed the whip and threw Kyle to the ground as easily as if he were nothing. The other knights drew their swords immediately, and even Kyle got up and raised his sword too. But Merlin didn't want to let their trivial existence go to waste for nothing, so he gave them a chance and told them, "If you want to live, apologize to me right now." Just as they were about to start a fight, suddenly a huge herd of monstrous creatures shaped like rhinos on fire came running toward the carriage. The knights ran in front of the carriage to protect their lady. As for Hobbs, as usual, he tried to crawl away from this disaster, but Merlin stood in his place, surprised by what was happening. He said to himself, "Why are these monsters running hysterically like this? Surely something in Denbashi scared them." In any case, he decided to intervene and save the knights from being trampled and deal with the attack himself. The knights were shocked by Merlin's power. The entire herd was coming to attack, but before reaching him, they turned suddenly and moved away as if afraid to touch him. Kyle stood amazed. How did these monsters never stop for anything, even death? Hobbs started nagging, Merlin asking what happened. Merlin replied simply and told him, "These monsters are demons, and demons instinctively avoid anyone stronger than them." But Hobbs, as usual, thought he was blabbering nonsense and said maybe Merlin threw monster repellent powder on them. Merlin was annoyed that he didn't believe him, so he left him and walked toward his carriage. But Kyle stopped him. Merlin thought the boy still wanted to fight even after what he saw, but Kyle thanked him sincerely and told him he saved all their lives, especially the life of Lady Cecilia, but the daughter of Duke Rose. Kyle tried to open the subject of the insults Merlin said earlier, but Cecilia cut the conversation short and told him no need for empty arguments. Then she approached Merlin and saw his adventurer badge and was shocked. "Are you really Iron Rank?" Despite that, she offered him to work as her personal knight for 10,000 gold coins. Hobbs, of course, as soon as he heard the word, said, "I agree," but she ignored him and told him, "You are not even worth 5 gold. Merlin usually sold himself for money, but today he wanted to prove his worth. He looked at her and said sarcastically, "You are poor and cannot afford the price of a boss like me." Then he offered a deal. "I agree to be a knight for you, but on the condition that you wipe all my debts to my old employers, the Demon Kings." He told her, with utmost coldness, that he owed 66 trillion gold. Cecilia and Kyle left him and walked away without replying. Then Merlin realized he lost a real job, so he started screaming after them, "Okay, my lady, let's negotiate! I can deduct 5 million gold from the number." But Cecilia returned to the main topic and told Kyle, "Hurry, we must reach the Denbashi crypt before Merlin or Arnold arrive." She screamed that she knew Arnold and considered him a rival to her, which was why she took the same mission. She wanted to beat everyone and impress her father with her achievement. If Arnold or Merlin beat her, her entire plan would be ruined. We switched to Arnold. The man was sitting in the carriage, extremely happy that he was sitting with his great love. Alice was not happy at all. She screamed at the driver and told him to speed up. Arnold tried to comfort her and told her, "Relax. We have the greatest adventurer in the world, Claude. Victory is guaranteed, and when we win, I will be worthy of you, and we can start our relationship." She pushed him away immediately and told him clearly, "I am not interested in you. The only man in my heart is the strongest warrior in existence, Nightblade." Claude was surprised and asked her, "Who is this that you call the strongest warrior?" When he heard about his achievements, he was unimpressed and said everyone he faced was nothing. The real heroes are the 4 heroes of the previous empire. The first of them was the Dragon Slayer Corona, whom we saw earlier collecting something from beneath the rubble of the Goblin Lair. Whoever she challenges does not come out alive, to the point she once single-handedly defeated 7 wizard-class enemies in one night. Then the twins Zoe and Joey, the sword magicians, and finally the man named Bernard the Dragon Slayer, the leader of the 4 heroes who never lost a battle in his life. Although Claude did not know Nightblade's true power, he was confident that before the 4 great heroes, Nightblade would look like a complete joke. Arnold thought all this talk was useless, because those heroes lived ages ago. As for Alice, she was about to explode with rage and kept pushing Claude to take back his words and was about to enter a state of hysterical screaming had a herd of fire rhinos not suddenly appeared running toward the team. They caught everyone's attention. These monsters never stopped, meaning the only solution was to fight them. Then Claude stepped forward and, with one strike, Ixo wiped out the entire herd. Everyone was shocked, and it seemed possible he could be a match for Merlin when they met later. Back to Merlin and Hobbs. They were the first to reach the crypt and set up camp. But when Alice arrived, she was insulted by him. He told her she was very slow and that he and Cecilia's team had arrived about 12 hours ago. Alice rained blows on his head and told him he was still reckless and silly, even though this mission might determine the future of her romantic life. The women with Merlin asked, "Who is this crazy woman?" Hobbs replied coldly, "This is Merlin's girlfriend." Naturally, as soon as they heard this, the girls ran away because they did not want to get involved with a taken man. Alice then started a fight with Merlin and reminded him of the bet he made with Arnold. Suddenly, Arnold entered the camp bragging that he would win the challenge with the power of money because he had the strongest adventurer, Claude. Arnold wanted to provoke Merlin and told him, "As soon as the mission ends, I will take Alice from you too." Merlin replied with mockery, "I don't care about a half-hero like her. I am here only for the 5,000 gold." Alice got sick of all this nonsense and walked away. After she left, Arnold decided to act noble and gave Merlin important information, saying that all this happened after a group of grave robbers tried to steal from the tomb of the ancient kingdom's advisor. This advisor was a summoning wizard and was the cause of the appearance of the army of skeletons terrorizing the area. Hobbs was startled, but Merlin took it as a joke and still saw that this mission was child's play. On the other side, Alice pretended to be wandering in the forest, and suddenly she spotted Claude alone, so she started following him quietly. She saw him open a magical gate through which he spoke with someone he called Your Majesty. The disaster was that this man called Claude by the name Bernard, meaning Claude turned out to be one of the 4 legendary heroes who lived long ago. Alice was shocked, and when she tried to back away, she stepped on a branch that broke loudly and revealed her location. Claude drew his sword, ready to kill anyone who knew his secret. But Alice, intelligent, pretended to be drunk and acted normally, saying, "Let's go back to the party." As she tried to drag him away with her, she had activated a spying spell behind his back. After she walked far enough safely, she revealed that she was now able to hear everything he said. Claude continued his conversation with the man, who turned out to be the prince of the fallen kingdom. The prince asked him about the progress, and Claude said he intended to exploit the stupid adventurers with him to reach the tomb of Advisor Ian. The advisor surely had something very important, a key with which he could return their lost empire. Claude swore he would kill Ian, who had betrayed them 400 years ago when he disappeared at the time they needed him. The prince closed the gate and gave all the responsibility to Claude as the leader of the 4 heroes. Alice was now lost, wondering what to do. If she went to Merlin, he would probably mock her, laugh, and not believe her. So she decided to face the matter herself and follow Claude. At this time, Cecilia and her knights arrived at the wizard Ian's tomb. Kyle advised her to rest, but she refused because she wanted to be the only one to finish the mission. Claude appeared, mocked them, and told them they were stupid to think they could enter a shrine made by the hands of the strongest wizard, saying they would get lost inside the maze, and left them to continue his way. Alice, intelligently, deduced from his words that the shrine was a maze, so she decided to stick to him so she wouldn't get lost. In the morning, Arnold woke up terrified when he didn't find Alice in the camp. The first thing that came to his mind was that she spent the night with Merlin, so he went to open his tent. He found Merlin sleeping, hugging a pet dragon. He was shocked by the sight, but reassured that she wasn't there. Merlin woke up angry and told him, "If you don't explain what you are doing, you will die by my hand right now," Arnold told him. Alice disappeared. Merlin replied coldly, "She is surely hiding from you because she got sick of your face." But Arnold linked it to Claude's disappearance as well. Then Hobbs, half asleep, said, "I saw them at night walking to the forest." Naturally, Arnold's heart broke, and he said, "Alice betrayed me and ran away with Claude." But Hobbs thought they probably went to complete the mission. As soon as Merlin heard this, he got charged up. "I cannot lose the 5,000 gold." So he dashed off, leaving Hobbs and Arnold behind to rot. On the other side, Claude was on the second floor of the shrine, smashing any monster he met, while Alice walked behind him secretly, benefiting from all the secret paths he knew until he reached the place where Ian's tomb was and told him to come out of his grave. Ian recognized him immediately and said, "You have been resurrected, Bernard." Bernard revealed that the prince brought back him and the other 3 heroes of the era using dark magic. Ian understood that the prince was still alive thanks to this magic, but he himself was always against this type of magic because he saw its end as destruction. He asked Bernard, "Why are you here?" Bernard replied, "The prince wants a book to help us restore the empire." But Ian refused and said, "I am now just a zombie whose goal is studying magic, nothing more." Then Bernard Bernard told him, "Then hand over the key you are guarding." Ian refused immediately and sharply told Bernard, "Did you forget or what? It was the prince himself who ignored my words and made a pact with the devil, and this pact is what destroyed the entire empire." But Bernard did not care. He drew his sword and decided to take the key by force and fight the strongest wizard in history, Alison. The other side was terrified to the point her legs were shaking and she couldn't stand straight, saying to herself, "I wish I hadn't come at all." At that time, Merlin was strolling on the first floor, cutting monsters left and right as if on a picnic. But since his brain didn't work properly, he kept going in circles in the maze without knowing how to get out, until he got bored and said, "Fine, I will solve it my way." He punched the ground with one fist, made a hole, and jumped down to the second floor. On the same floor was Cecilia's team and her knights. They had weakened and were losing against some zombies. Suddenly, two strong monsters appeared without introduction and attacked quickly. One of them plunged his sword into Kyle's chest. Kyle fell to the ground and told his lady, "Run and leave us." But Cecilia would never leave him. Cecilia was shocked and said, "How did you, Merlin, who is just a weak iron adventurer, enter a dangerous place like this?" Merlin smiled and bragged, "I hit the ground with my fist and entered from the floor above." Cecilia was impressed by his genius thinking and asked him, "Please save me and Kyle. We cannot fight." But Merlin replied coldly, "I don't work for free, my lady. I am here for the gold only." Cecilia begged him, "I will give you money. Just save us." Merlin smiled and said, "Now you are talking. I want 66 trillion, not a penny less." Cecilia was shocked and told him, "What? I don't have that amount." He decided to take only the 10,000 gold from them, grabbed both, and threw them up to the wall, leaving them hanging so the zombies wouldn't reach them, telling them, "You will be safe this way." Then he left them and walked into the shrine where Bernard was fighting Ian in a fierce battle. The fight was full of magical auras, light and darkness, and Ian summoned a giant undead beast to defeat Bernard. In the middle, Merlin entered the hall and interrupted the whole fight. As soon as Alice saw him, she felt relieved for the first time and said, "Thank God I saw your face, you idiot." Merlin smiled and said, "Nice, the undead wizard is still alive. This way I can take the credit after finishing him off." Ian got annoyed and said, "What audacity! How dare you enter my place and speak like this?" He sent a powerful spell at him, but Merlin simply moved his finger and blocked the spell, as if it were air. Bernard and Ian exchanged looks and said, "This boy is not normal. He must be at least at wizard level." So they decided to unite to finish him off. Ian sent his undead beasts at him, but Merlin dodged them as if they were slow. At the same time, he leveled Bernard with a light sword strike, sending him flying far away. The two plus the beasts attacked him together, and Merlin stood playing and blocking them without even breaking a sweat. Alice said to herself, "Oh, he is strong, but still, this is not fair. There are two of them plus monsters against him." However, she remained hidden because she knew he would insult her and call her a lame failure of a hero if she tried to help him. In the end, Merlin said, "Enough joking," raised his sword, and sliced the monster along with Ian himself. Ian vanished, leaving the key behind. Bernard knew he could not defeat Merlin, so he told him, "Give me the key, and I will repay my debt to you someday." But Merlin replied, saying, "I was scammed before. I want cash." Bernard offered him 200,000 gold. Alice interrupted and said, "Wait, Merlin, this Bernard is a walking corpse from 400 years ago and wants to restore the empire through evil." Bernard's face twisted, and he said, "My mistake was that I did not kill you back in the forest," and attacked her. But Merlin stood in front of her and said, "If she dies, where will I sleep? I live at her place." Merlin told Bernard, "You are mathematically the loser. If you plus Ian plus the monsters could not handle me, how will you defeat me alone?" Bernard laughed and told him, "I was not using all my power. Now witness my true power." He used a forbidden technique called soul sacrifice that multiplied his power 100 times in exchange for his entire lifespan. Bernard transformed into a terrifying monster, laughed and said, "Now you will be destroyed." But Merlin clapped for him while bored and said, "Come on, show us what you've got." Bernard attacked him with maximum power, but Merlin still blocked it easily, and with a single strike, cut him in half. As he was dying, he looked at Merlin's sword and said, "That is the Vortex Sword. You are the legendary demon, ruler of pride." Then he turned to Ash. Merlin sighed and told him, "Curse you. Bernard, I was going to take 200,000 gold from you." He held the key and said, "Clearly it has a value greater than it appears." Alice said, "We must return the key to the kingdom." Merlin laughed and told her, "Are you stupid or what? You are in debt for millions. This key might open a treasure that lets us live like kings." She told him, "Fine, but we go 50-50. Merlin told her, "I will give you 10% only." As they were leaving, Merlin felt that he forgot something, but said, "Not important. My mind is not free for these things." What he forgot, of course, was that Cecilia and Kyle were still stuck amidst the zombie army, screaming, "Someone save us!" After everyone left the crypt, a small boy emerged from inside a chest, breathing a sigh of relief as if reassured that the intruders had left. He went back to reading books, which meant he was likely Ian himself, since he had said before that he did not want to do anything other than study his spells while being a zombie. At the same time, at the camp, Arnold and Hobbs were being attacked by some zombies that were not easy to kill, but suddenly all the zombies disappeared. Then the two understood that someone had ended the magic animating the zombies. At this exact moment, Alice and Merlin arrived, but as usual, they entered bickering like lovers. Of course, those waiting behind thought Alice was the one who finished the mission and ran to congratulate her, which upset Merlin very much. Alice herself tried to give him credit and said Merlin was the one who did everything, but not a single one of the adventurers standing there believed that a loser like Merlin of Iron Rank could kill a zombie wizard, let alone defeat him. They thought Alice was trying to save his dignity. Immediately after, the journalist Bella appeared from the kingdom's newspaper, coming to cover what happened in Denbashi. She decided to interview Alice and call her the hero who saved many lives. Merlin, standing on the side boiling with envy that he received no appreciation, started imitating a fangirl, saying, "Oh my god, this is Alice, the hero who saved the day, yay, yay, yay." Alice, of course, was about to snap from his nonsense. She grabbed the camera, pointed it at Merlin, and told the whole world that he was Merlin, the one who killed 2 legendary rank enemies with a single strike of his sword. But Merlin no longer cared and said he was used to it anyway. Back when he was in the Demon King's palace, he was never mentioned in the headlines. What really mattered to him was money, and he was very upset that since people thought Alice finished the mission, the money would go entirely to her. Alice felt guilty and offered to give him 60% of the reward, but Merlin continued walking, ignoring her. She had to run after him and negotiate so he wouldn't be upset. On the other side, inside a volcanic temple, the heroes of the previous empire gathered to mourn their fallen comrade, standing before their king who sat on the throne above. One of the twins, named Zoe, was sobbing, then sat, laughing and saying Bernard was an idiot for letting some adventurers trick him, and because of his negligence, the key to the Abyss Gate was now in strange hands. The second hero, Corona, said, "We should not speak ill of Bernard, he was the most loyal among us." But Zoe believed loyalty was useless, and what mattered was finding warriors worthy of reviving the empire. His brother, Joey, agreed, but Corona felt insulted and argued with them. At that moment, the prince struck his staff and released a powerful wind spell that forced everyone to be silent. Then he announced that they must accelerate their plan to summon the Hell Legions, because their secrets were exposed. Since Zoe and Joey were annoying, the prince told Corona to go to Riscombe and retrieve the key quickly. We returned to Merlin, whose mood improved. Finally, after agreeing to the deal with Alice, that the reward would be split 80% for him and 20% for her. As they were returning to the carriage, Arnold started nagging again, saying he wanted a second chance to win the right to date Alice. Merlin told him dismissively, "Take her, man, and enjoy." But Arnold refused and said, "I do not want charity," and started repeating his ridiculous romantic speeches until Alice was about to throw him out of the carriage. Hobbs began to worry whether the kingdom would be able to handle the ancient empire issue or not. Arnold, being a noble, reassured him and told him, "Don't worry, the queen has the Bohemian Knights, led by 12 legendary rank warriors known as the Knights of Thorns, and their leader is the strongest." Back to the Knights of Thorns. They finally went to the crypt and saved Kyle and Cecilia. Merlin and the others arrived at the city, and suddenly swords were thrown at them without prior warning. Merlin blocked them easily and asked who was attacking. It turned out to be some knights wearing black robes who said they wanted to speak with Sir Merlin. As soon as he knew they didn't want him, he stepped back and let the lion's share fall on the lame hero. Alice thought they were remnants of the ancient empire, so she unleashed ice magic and her sword on them and started fighting. Arnold asked Merlin and Hobbs, "Won't we help her?" Hobbs said no, because he was weak and would slow her down. Merlin was also convinced she was stronger than the fools attacking her. In the middle, one of the knights was exposed and turned out to be named Chapman, a follower of the Bohemian Knights under the command of the 9th legendary knight, Sir Sahedin, coming to investigate Alice. Alice was surprised and said, "Investigate why?" Chapman said, "The investigation is over," took his knights, and left. Merlin then started provoking her, asking, "Are those weaklings supposed to be the strongest knights in the kingdom?" Alice snapped and insulted him because he left her to fight alone. As they walked, Chapman told his knights that he was convinced Alice was strong, but not strong enough to kill 2 legendary rank enemies. So all that was said was exaggeration, and he told them to send a report to the commander that the matter was trivial and not worth worrying about. But suddenly, a mysterious person gave Chap a small cut on his neck from behind, and he didn't notice anything but a strange sting he felt. Alice and Merlin returned to the Adventurers Guild to collect the reward from Letitia. When they received the money, Letitia said their debts were deducted and also revealed that their debts were merged because the guild master registered them as a husband and wife adventurer team. Arnold entered a state of depression, discovering his true love was already married. Alice gave him a kick and told him to stop the drama over a situation that was already a disaster. She looked at Letitia and said, "Fix this registration immediately." Letitia said, "That is not possible unless you bring a divorce certificate, and this certificate will not be issued until you get married officially first. Alice screamed and said it was impossible to desecrate her life with this marriage. Merlin couldn't believe she still saw herself as high and mighty while she was a lame hero. In the end, Letitia clarified that the debts were split in half, meaning Alice's 50 million debt was halved, and half was now on Merlin. The man entered a depression, and Alice laughed and told him, "This is karma, my dear, since you are the one who stole my mithril armor and got me into these debts in the first place." The issue now was that they had to work themselves to death all their lives to pay off the debts they were stuck in. But how? They both hated each other from the heart. Even while returning home, they sat fighting with their eyes over who would sleep on the bed. Merlin, being the rational man, said, "Girl, let's be fair. A day for me and a day for you." But she replied and told him, "What do you mean? This is my house, so I have priority." She also said, "If it's the bed's turn, then it's also the housework's turn." From here, she decided to give him all the housework today. But Merlin, of course, refused and told her, "Dream on," and went, throwing himself on the sofa and slept immediately, as if saying, "I give up already." Alice thought she had won the round and would make him sweep and cook. But no, the plan failed. She went screaming at him, saying, "Get up, Merlin! Is this how companions behave?" But Merlin ignored her completely and registered a code in his brain: ignore Alice forever, and went back to sleep. In the morning, Alice entered the guild where Merlin was and kept screaming, "I want a divorce right now." He was snoring all night like a pig and made me cook and do everything, and in the end, he ate all the food while I was in the bathroom. Merlin replied to her very coldly and told her, "Your food is bad. I actually did you a favor. Thank God." Alice exploded with rage and told him, "You are retarded." Merlin on his side said, "I just want to focus on how to get money quickly to get rid of the half potato in my life." So he asked Letitia for a way to earn money quickly. She told him, "There are SS-Rank missions where one pays millions of gold." Merlin's eyes lit up and said, "Oh, that's nice. Kill strong monsters and earn lots of gold? I am ready." But Letitia laughed and told him, "My dear, you are still Iron Rank. The minimum to enter these missions is to be mithril, meaning you have a long way to go." Merlin said, "Then let's do a reevaluation right now. Call the guildmaster." But Letitia laughed more and said, "Impossible to upgrade, man. Alice has a chance to be higher than you." Then Merlin turned to Alice and told her, "Fine, you will train with me hard until you become strong and reach this rank." He kept looking at her with a terrifying look and said, "Prepare to suffer. No pampering or laziness." They started training with sparring. Merlin said, "I want to measure the strength of your strike." Alice grabbed her sword and hit him. Merlin, with utmost simplicity, sent her flying away while picking his nose. Afterward, a strike sent her flying again. Alice said, "You are not training me. You are beating me." But Merlin told her, "Before you train, you must lose everything." Alice got startled and asked him, "What? What exactly do you want to take?" He got angry and said, "Girl, are you stupid or what? I mean, you must reach the stage of life and death to evolve." He started bragging and told her, "I fought giants, sea, monsters, and dragons." Alice thought this was the secret of his strength, but he said, "I was finishing them off with a single strike. Anyway, so it was all just for show, nothing more." Then he told her, "Come on, if you don't bring out all your power in the next attack, you will die." Alice prepared herself and created a magical fog, then attacked with a blizzard. But Merlin was immune to magic and dispelled it easily. She tried again and attacked with ice spikes, but still no use. She tried to approach him using the spikes, but he continued closing his eyes, catching her sword while it was in the air, and said, "You are as slow as a turtle." This time, he attacked, but he exaggerated the force and knocked her unconscious. While looking at the small cut on his hand, Merlin said, "What is this? This sword has a unique shape." Indeed, it was the same legendary sword his sister Lilith mentioned at the beginning that Alice carried, a sword harmful to demons. But the problem was that Alice herself was weak. The reason he came was to inform Merlin that a red-haired woman wearing purple, whose beauty steals the heart, was waiting for him at the guild. This woman was one of the 4 heroes, Corona, but Merlin didn't know her, so he thought she was from the demon continent coming to demand the debts he owed, and he started to worry. Hobbs told him, "Come, I know a secret place where you can relax." At that moment, Corona, sitting outside the guild, saw the key hanging around Merlin's neck and started following him without him noticing. Hobbs took Merlin into the forest until they reached a secret cabaret. Inside the place, Helena, the owner, welcomed Merlin and showed him the way to a booth there. While he was happily looking at the menu, at that moment, Helena entered and told Merlin someone was coming to meet him. Merlin got tense quickly and shoved Corona away, imagining she was Alice. He stood thinking, "Why am I so tense? She isn't my wife anyway." Besides, he didn't do anything with this old dancer to be afraid. In any case, he followed Helena, who took him into a secret corridor. While he was thinking she might be dragging him to a strange cult or something, suddenly she stopped and started undressing. Merlin turned his face the other way, like a respectful man, but suddenly she transformed into her true form, a winged demoness, and said to him, "My master." Helena explained to him that she was a demon general working under the orders of the ruler of lust, Asmodeus, the fourth demon king. Here, Merlin realized that the one wanting to meet him was Asmodeus himself. She replied she was trying to cut costs and just survive, and told he was also selling summoning scrolls for demons to humans. Merlin denied knowing anything. Asmodeus slapped him lightly and told him, "The Demon Council always told you to manage your territory well, but you never did, and that's why they fired you." From there, he fled to the human land. Merlin told her, "Maybe now the council realized my value and wants to apologize to me." But she shocked him and said, "Since Lilith took your place, performance increased, and she succeeded more than you." She added insult to injury and told him he was still in debt and supposed to pay the debt with interest too. Merlin got annoyed and said, "Are you a demon tricking me?" She replied coldly, "Yes, I am a demon." He asked her why she was here. She replied and told him she noticed the presence of abyssal forces on this continent and thought it was him causing chaos because he once killed an abyssal ambassador recklessly. She warned him to be careful because the abyssal power was very strong. Merlin laughed and said even if the Lord of the Abyss came, he would send him flying with one strike. Asmodeus told him, "I hope that doesn't happen because if a fight breaks out between you, the whole world will be destroyed." After this talk, Merlin left. Corona was following him from afar. She wanted the key, but first, she wanted to punish him because he insulted her and called her an old hag. She attacked him from behind, but her knives didn't touch his neck. Merlin thought a mosquito bit him, so he swatted with his hand simply like that, sending her flying far away. Then he smelled her scent and knew she was the same old dancer. He yelled at her from afar, "Stay away from me, you old hag. I can't stand you." But Corona didn't give up. Her neck broke from his accidental hit, and then she knew Merlin wasn't just a normal adventurer. He was very strong. Yet, she was determined to win if she used her trump card. Merlin was walking in the forest at the slowest speed. Suddenly, Alice popped out of nowhere and attacked him, starting to yell, asking where he was, why he left her, and her pain, and then disappeared. She saw this as rudeness from him and wanted him to apologize immediately. She asked, "Where did you go at night like this?" Merlin acted like a cheating husband and told her he was taking a walk, but Alice smelled women's perfume on him and suspected he was partying somewhere. Merlin told her he was free to do what he wanted and didn't need permission from her. She replied and told him, "No, you need my permission since we are married." Suddenly, she remembered they weren't married at all, but still said she had a right to speak on it because they were married in name at least. Merlin stood shocked and didn't understand anything, but in the end, he promised Alice he wouldn't flirt with any other random girl, especially after she threatened to throw him out of the house if he did it again. At that moment, a strange atmosphere occurred between them, a sudden romantic tension, and each of them started avoiding looking into the other's eyes. Alice, unwillingly, told him, "Come with me tomorrow to the astronomy tower. I want to meet Lady Da Vinci and have her appraise this key." At the same time, Corona had reached a frozen mountain and broke the seal holding a legendary monster named the Ice Dragon, hoping it would finish off Merlin. The next day, Merlin and Alice went to the astronomy tower, and there they met Da Vinci and her partner Rossetti, the cat human. As soon as Rossetti saw Merlin, she was very happy and asked him, "Is it true you married Alice?" She added, "Honestly, whoever married her has terrible luck." Alice naturally knew Rossetti and Da Vinci, so she told Merlin, "By the way, Rossetti is the second person I hate the most." Merlin was amazed and asked her, "Who was the first then?" She told him coldly, "You." These words broke Merlin's heart in two, but she quickly clarified that she was not married. Da Vinci said she needed time to decipher the symbols and study the key well. Alice trusted her, left the key with her, took Merlin, and left. They returned home. Merlin sat writing a letter to Lilith, filling it with lies, writing that he was the #1 adventurer and earning thousands of dinars every day. Suddenly his heart ached, and he knew the curse on him activated because he hadn't killed any strong enemies. He ran to the guild looking for a hard mission to kill, monsters of legendary level. Leticia heard him and called him and Alice, telling them there was a special mission, a direct assignment, and the client requested you two specifically. The requirement was to control a savage dragon threatening the villages near Mount Navas. Hobbs got scared as soon as he heard and said, "Oh my god, that is the mountain where one of the 6 legendary dragons, the Ice Dragon, is sealed." Alice remembered her teacher's words and said, "This dragon is so strong that it froze an entire sea and turned towering waves into ice in an instant. It has the power to wipe a kingdom off the map." The matter was so terrifying that even the guild employee said this mission required nothing less than an amethyst adventurer. But Merlin's body was trembling with excitement, and he said, "If I defeat this dragon, my lifespan will increase by at least half a month." He carried Alice on his shoulder without asking her at all and ran with her toward the village at the foot of the mountain. At the same time, at the mountain peak, Corona was speaking to the dragon in the dragon language. The dragon was disgusted by her broken accent and told told her, "Speak to me in the language of humans. It is better." He agreed to return the favor since she released him from the seal, but refused to lower himself to the level of scaring farmers. Corona feared him and told him quickly, "I didn't mean that. I have a plan. I want to bring my enemy here. He is very strong and I don't want to lose him through tricks." The dragon told her, "I do not like these moves. I will go to the city of Rixum and destroy Merlin and Alice." She stopped him and told him, "Wait, your friend the light dragon was defeated and captured by the demon king." The dragon refused to believe it and said, "Impossible for light to lose against a demon." But in the end, he said, "Before I take my revenge, I must finish off Merlin and Alice for you." Corona reassured him and said, "Don't worry, I set a trap for you. I froze a girl from the village in a block of ice, and I will disguise myself as her and lure them here." Merlin and Alice reached the village. Alice said, "I am freezing even while wearing many layers of clothes." Merlin replied while busy, "It appears to be because of this mountain. Look at the giant ice on the left." While people expected him to fear the dragon's power, Merlin was thinking of something else entirely. What kind of ice dragon is this that cannot create more than this small snow mountain? While they were standing there, a cute village girl approached and asked them, "Are you the great heroes who defeated the undead wizard?" But take note, this girl was actually Corona, who was exposed before, but Merlin and Alice did not know. So naturally, they asked her, "And who are you, miss?" The girl replied with total innocence, saying, "I am Annie, the village mayor's daughter, and I am the client who requested you specifically for this mission." Merlin, from the first moment, sensed the smell of disguised old people, so he told her, "Hey girl, are you a disguised old woman or what?" Alice immediately silenced Merlin and hit him so he wouldn't ruin her reputation in front of the girl, then asked Annie about the situation. Annie started explaining while crying, saying, "Imagine, a terrifying ice dragon came to us and told us if we didn't hand over young girls as sacrifices, he would freeze the entire village in snow, and tomorrow is my turn. I don't want to die while I'm young." Alice's heart broke for her, and she promised her, saying, "Do not fear. We will get rid of this monster before tomorrow and save the entire village." But Merlin was not convinced at all and said to himself, "These ancient dragons don't usually attack humans, and human meat tastes disgusting to them." But as usual, Alice didn't give him a chance to open his mouth and silenced Merlin again. Then she took them to her father, the village mayor, who was standing with the farmers trying to break the big snow mountain. As soon as the mayor saw them, he said, "Go back where you came from. This dragon is much stronger than you. He is one of the 6 legendary dragons." Here, Merlin's eyes lit up and said, "Guys, leave the dragon to me." Instead of punching the mountain, he just poked it with his finger, and suddenly the entire ice block crumbled, and all the people gaped in amazement. Merlin was hungry and didn't want to fight the dragon on an empty stomach, so he asked them for food. Naturally, they fulfilled his request after seeing his power. He finished eating and started nagging the mayor about the reward. The mayor was surprised and said, "What reward? My daughter doesn't even know how to write, so how could she write a mission request like this?" Alice was confused, but Annie quickly changed the subject and told her, "Come, Alice, let's bathe in the hot springs," and dragged Merlin along by force. Did not have an appetite anyway. As soon as they entered the bath, Annie searched their clothes in the changing room to find the key, but unfortunately, she did not find it. So she said to herself, "I will have to switch to plan B." In the hot tub, the atmosphere was very awkward between Alice and Merlin. Merlin approached her and told her, "Look, do you want to know how to defeat the dragon? Inside him is something called the dragon core. If you eat it, you will take his power and magic too." Alice was shocked and told him, "Are you serious? This is a legendary treasure. How are you giving it to me simply like that?" Merlin replied very coldly and told her, "It is useless to me. I am already max level. I want you to be strong so you can take SSS missions instead of me." Alice immediately asked him, "Are you doing this because you love me or what?" Merlin roasted her and told her, "No, you flat chest. I am not interested in nothingness anyway. I just want you to be strong." She regained confidence and told him, "I don't care anyway. My heart is with Nightblade, the strongest warrior in the continent." Merlin got annoyed and almost choked, telling her, "Nightblade what? I am Nightblade." She did not believe him and gave him an uppercut, sending him flying out of the bath, saying to him, "How dare you mock my lover and claim you are him?" She started hitting him with everything around her while he screamed, telling her, "I swear I am him, and he won't marry you if you don't fix your attitude." Suddenly, Merlin's heart, which was wrapped in chains, began to hurt him, and Alice at this moment hit him with a pan until he drowned. She thought he was mocking her, but when he did not come up quickly, she had to save him and take him to the village unconscious. At this exact moment, the ice dragon appeared. Alice stood alone trying to cast her strongest spell, but the dragon mocked her and told her, "Your magic is weak." Alice realized she was about to die, but in the last moment, she wished she could see Nightblade one last time. Suddenly, Merlin appeared in front of her, taking the dragon's hit with his leg. She saw his back and felt seriously that he might actually be Nightblade, or was she hallucinating from the cold? Merlin looked at the dragon and told him, "Aha! Cute, you little one, come here." He grabbed him in a bear hug. The dragon was crushed and said, "Is this boy crazy or what?" Alice said from afar, "Get used to it, dragon. This is Merlin's personality. See see, I stayed alive. Merlin wanted to finish quickly and drew his sword, but Alice stopped him and told him, take the fight away. You will ruin the village. Merlin called a timeout, threw a small stick far away, and told the dragon, fetch, pretty boy. The dragon got annoyed and attacked, but Merlin grabbed him with his hand and threw him far away like Superman. At this moment, Annie ran to Alice and cried in her lap, but suddenly took out a knife and stabbed her. As for Merlin, he played cat and mouse with the dragon a bit, and when he got bored, he revealed his identity and said, I am the Lord of Pride, and no magic works on me. The dragon got more annoyed and screamed, saying, I will not die before I take revenge for the light dragon. Merlin laughed and told him, you misunderstand, my dear. The light dragon you called Pocky is still alive and standing, guard at the Demon King's palace. The ice dragon did not believe Merlin and told him, you are a liar, you demon. At this moment, Alice was still standing and blocking Annie's strike. Then Annie revealed herself and said she was not Annie. She was Corona herself, the legendary butcher from the time of the ancient empire. Alice started connecting the dots and said, ah, you came to avenge Bernard's death, right? But Corona shook her head and said, I have nothing to do with Bernard. What I want is the key Merlin stole from the tomb. Alice acted innocent and said she knew nothing about the key, but it was very clear she was lying. Corona then decided to capture her and trap her with her genjutsu, but Alice, who trained under Merlin, managed to see through the illusion and break it. Corona was forced to use other plans. While the fight was still on, a second hero from the ancient empire heroes appeared, Zoe. He came specifically to watch Corona's battle. Corona did not want to be embarrassed in front of him, so she decided to take the fight seriously. In a short moment, she wiped the floor with Alice and defeated her easily. Then Corona gave Alice's body, while she was unconscious, to Zoe and told him, keep her as a hostage. This way we can force Merlin to hand us the key. Merlin was about to draw his sword, but suddenly his heart ached badly. The pain seized him to the point that he started to petrify again. At this moment, Corona came and kicked him far away, that telling the ice dragon with pride, wait for me to break his defenses. But the dragon rejected her presence and told her, get out, you filth. This place is not for the likes of you, slammed her with his tail and sent her flying. Merlin stood up again, telling himself he must finish quickly before he actually died. The dragon decided to attack with his final strike and started forming a huge ice structure to crush Merlin under the snow. But Merlin, with just a light touch of his vortex sword, destroyed all that snow and shattered the dragon too. The dragon, in his last moments, could not believe it and said, how does a demon have this power? His level is like the wizards of the leader era. Merlin told him, I myself don't understand. Go ask the witch when you go up. Anyway, goodbye. I didn't mean to do this. I could have made you my pet if my circumstances weren't so hard. But suddenly, Corona came running at the dragon, took its core, and ate it immediately. Merlin looked at her and told her, girl, that cannot be eaten raw. It will ruin you. At first, Corona felt a legendary power and told herself she became the strongest being in the world. Even though Merlin stood before her, she ignored him completely. Merlin did not enter into an argument with her, but warned her and said if she did not spit out the core now, she would remain trapped in this half-human, half-dragon form forever. Corona remembered all the insults Merlin told her all the time and decided to take revenge. Merlin stood watching her look like a buzzing bee flying around him and said to himself she forgot who was before her, the one who killed one of the 6 legendary dragons with a single strike. Corona used her finishing technique, double strangulation, but Merlin moved as if he wasn't moving at all, dodging it easily. She did not give up and kept attacking while he blocked every hit calmly, telling her, you are weak and delusional and do not even deserve for me to look at you. Corona got annoyed and decided to use the ice dragon's ultimate technique. She began chanting the spell in the dragon language, but Merlin could not control his laughter and told her, you are speaking like a joke. Your accent is very bad. Never mind. Continue. I am sorry I interrupted you. Corona was very provoked and decided to freeze the whole world around him using the dragon move, cruelty and falling. Ice. Indeed, everything around her froze completely. Even the air itself became like ice. Corona felt she became a true wizard, but Merlin stood as he was, unfrozen. The most that happened was he sneezed. He told her, enough, I am bored. These techniques will not work on me. Corona admitted Merlin was strong, but told him, your negligence made you lose the villagers and Alice. They all died frozen because of me. Merlin was affected greatly, not for the villagers, but for Alice. He did not know she was actually taken by Zoe before freezing. He remembered all his moments with her. And then for the first time, Merlin truly got angry. With just one strike, he wiped Corona from existence. Afterward, he stood before the ice and said, I wonder if there is still a chance to save Alice. At that moment, Zoe appeared and said he also froze because of Corona's spell. But since he was a legendary level hero, he could free himself. Zoe opened a magic gate to escape. Merlin spotted the gate, ran at him, and said, give me my roommate now, and struck with the sword. But Zoe closed the gate quickly, and nothing was cut except his hand that fell inside. Merlin regretted not using his full power to finish him, but he couldn't because a full strike would destroy everything around, even the frozen villagers. He now knew that Zoe kidnapped Alice for the key, which meant she was still alive. alive and a hostage with him. His heart told him to save her, feeling he might actually be falling in love with her, but he did not want to be a slave to her or a dog following her. With Corona's disappearance, the ice she made started melting. Merlin rejoiced when he remembered the villagers actually were hiding in the cellars below. He stood a moment and asked himself, since when did I start caring about humans like this? At the same time, Zoe carried Alice and threw her at his twin brother Joey. As soon as Joey saw him, he noticed that his brother's left hand was cut off. Zoe told him this happened only because he let his guard down a bit and got tricked as usual. Joey agreed with his brother's words, but even this agreement made Zoe angry at him and yell at him, saying, "It is not the time to agree with me, you idiot." Zoe continued and insulted Joey, saying he was useless and could not do anything, and was about to hit him. But suddenly the prince entered and told Zoe to stop, asking him to explain what happened and why Corona's soul flame went out. Zoe replied saying Corona and the ice dragon were both defeated by the man who stole the key. It appeared that Zoe did not know Merlin was the strongest demon king, so he reassured the prince, saying he and his brother, using their fusion technique, would be able to defeat Merlin and win for sure. The prince's time was running out, so he asked Zoe to bring him the key quickly. Zoe promised him that Merlin would come to them himself to save the captive they kidnapped, and then the key would return to them against his will. Also, Zoe said he took it as a personal matter and wanted to cut Merlin's arm and sew it to his body as revenge. As usual, Joey agreed with his words without thinking. Alice woke up after a few hours of fainting and found a dwarf girl in front of her. She thought that Corona defeated her before she lost consciousness, so she understood she was now in the secret headquarters of Corona's gang. Suddenly, Joey entered the dungeon. As soon as the girl saw him, she was terrified and started begging him and crying and telling him she would listen and didn't want him to hurt her again. Alice was surprised and then understood that this man looked peaceful or shy, but in reality was very dangerous. She got up quickly, drew her sword with ice and stabbed Joey, but Joey felt no pain. On the contrary, he drew his sword too and intended to punish her because she was not acting like a polite captive. Before dealing with Alice, he turned to the girl and cut her arm and began sucking her blood in a hideous way. Alice couldn't hold herself and told him, "You are a sadistic criminal." Suddenly, he turned his face toward her in a terrifying way, saying that even when he cut the neighbor kid's fingers, people called him a criminal. But according to him, he didn't want to do that, and it was his brother who forced him. He said until now, if he didn't listen to his brother, he got punished. Joey started telling her about his dark past with his brother Zoe. Once his brother ordered him to make his mother shut up from talking too much, and when he couldn't do it, Zoe beat him and kept beating him until he obeyed. The same thing happened when he tortured villagers and prisoners while they were still alive. Joey said he apologized to his victims all the time, but none of them forgave him. Everyone saw him as the guilty one, even though he considered himself just a puppet in his brother's hands. As he screamed and cried, he said, "Why does everyone blame me? He is the one who should be blamed." Alice was very startled and understood this man was not sane at all. But strangely, the fit of madness that came over him made Joey leave her and walk away, which saved her from torture. Afterward, Alice approached the elf girl and started calming her down while patting her head. She introduced herself, and the girl replied saying her name was Shirley and clarified she was not from the human kingdom, but came from the southern elf kingdom. The day she left her house to climb, these evil people kidnapped her and imprisoned her here. She told her the reason they collected her blood daily was that the prince needed this blood to make a magical potion that kept him alive even after 400 years. Shirley continued and said when she was kidnapped, she found in the same cell the corpse of an ancient elf whose blood was drained day after day until she died. Shirley was very terrified, crying, and afraid her end would be like hers. Alice held her in her arms and told her she was confident someone would definitely come to save them. Even she herself began to wonder, do I trust that? Merlin will come to save me? Shirley asked her, who is the person you trust will come? Alice replied only with a simple sentence, someone very important to me. On the other side, Da Vinci was examining the abyssal key. Suddenly, she went into a trance. In her dream, she found herself standing before strange abyssal creatures, maybe even before their leader who looked like a dinosaur, huge and terrifying. At this moment, Merlin was running toward her in the astronomy tower. He found Da Vinci spaced out, so with a single touch on her forehead, he woke her from the trance. Da Vinci began explaining to Merlin and her terrified friend Rossetti that this key opened a gate to the abyss, which meant it was very dangerous. She suggested they hand the key over to the kingdom, but Merlin refused because he needed the key to negotiate with the enemies and return Alice, who was kidnapped by the idiots of the ancient empire. Merlin promised her that as soon as he saved Alice, he would deal with everything himself. Da Vinci handed him the key. As he was leaving, he told her, no matter how terrifying the enemy is, even if they come from the abyss itself, I will wipe them all out with a single strike. Merlin now had the key, but the problem was he didn't know where Alice was imprisoned. He had a suggestion to ask for help from the demon folk, but that meant he had to go to Lilith, who would surely give give him a considerable beating just for trying to save a human girl. Or go to Asmodeus, who also wouldn't miss the chance to be snarky with him. While he was skeptical, Arnold entered with Hobbs and started blaming Merlin for letting Alice get kidnapped. It turned out they knew everything, from Letitia, to whom Merlin had told the whole story. Thanks to this information, they could pinpoint Alice's location. Hobbs showed Merlin on the map where the headquarters of the ancient empire heroes was. Arnold said he issued a reward worth $1 million gold to anyone who saved Alice. Sahedin, one of the Knights of Thorns, had already set off there. Arnold thought there was no need to worry about Alice anymore, but Merlin couldn't just sit still and wait. Usually, yes, he loved to sit, but because of his confused feelings toward Alice, he decided to move. Indeed, he ran to the enemy camp. At the same time, Sahedin was about to reach the enemy's base with Chapman in his army as a general. Chapman told him that a legendary man like him didn't need to come personally to repel weak enemies like these. But Sahedin clarified to him that he had no choice, especially since the queen herself summoned him for this mission. The matter didn't end there. She also assigned him 2 big tasks. The first was to achieve a crushing victory over the losers of the previous empire so people would trust the royal family and the Bohemian Knights again. The second was to diminish Nightblade's fame, because if people thought a hero like him was the savior, trust in the authority would decrease further. That was why the queen hadn't removed the bounty on his head yet. Sahedin also had important information that the elf princess of the southern kingdom, Shirley, was imprisoned here. So if they saved her, the relationship between their kingdom and the southern kingdom would be much better. But suddenly Zoe appeared in the face of the army and struck Sahedin with his sword. Sahedin blocked the strike with a shield and returned it to him until he made him bleed. Zoe then felt the opponent was truly strong, so he decided to take it seriously and use the shadow, sword art, an ancient legendary technique that summons dozens of clones with his same power. The shadows attacked Sahedin's knights, and Zoe entered, himself to fight Sahedin face to face. At this moment, Merlin, who was lost in the forest, spotted explosions from afar, so he ran there saying maybe he could find the way to the castle through them. The battle was blazing, but Sahedin was already crushing Zoe. But Zoe surprised everyone, bound his broken bones again, and stood up. Then he summoned his brother Joey, using the fusion technique to finish off Sahedin. Sahedin was forced to give it his all, his power, but unfortunately, his shield could not protect him from the combined power of the brothers, and Sahedin fell. The only one left alive was Chapman, whose heart dropped from fear. Zoe, instead of killing him and being done with it, decided to use him as a toy to amuse himself. He dragged him toward Joey and told him to torture him to hear his screams, because the sound of an enemy while being tortured was a special pleasure for him. As usual, Zoe made his brother do the dirty work, and Joey was about to start on Chapman, but Merlin appeared suddenly and said to Zoe, "Ready to die yet?" Zoe came very close to Merlin and told him with full confidence that he would torture him until he wished for death. Merlin pushed him away and said, "Respect personal space, buddy. I don't understand what is wrong with you. Go see a doctor." This talk made Zoe unable to believe that. Merlin was taking the matter as a joke, so he decided to show him his power and told him that he and his brother wiped out the Bohemian Knights, who were the strongest knights in the entire continent. But Merlin didn't care and told him, "My dogs hit harder than you." This word insulted Zoe greatly, so he decided to use the fusion technique with his brother again. Before he started, Merlin exploded with rage and said, "Where is my wife?" Then quickly corrected himself and told him, "I mean my roommate. I don't have a wife anyway." Zoe refused to reply and told him he wouldn't cooperate unless he handed over the abyssal key. But he got a bit arrogant, and after merging with his brother, he told him the truth. "Alice is in the temple behind you, but you won't make it to save her because you will die." Now, the brothers launched their final strike, but Merlin wiped it out with a single strike from his sword, which left only one survivor, Joey, because he was much stronger than Zoe. Merlin was surprised and asked himself how Joey was the stronger one, yet followed the orders of a weakling like Zoe. This talk touched Joey and made him gather his courage. Instead of remaining a follower, he turned on his brother, grabbed his sword, and began stabbing him with fatal stabs. Then he took his sword and said he didn't need to merge with him. All he needed was the sword to unleash the final technique. Indeed, he used their final strike to wipe out Zoe himself, but Merlin got bored, drew the vortex sword, and hit Joey with a single strike that finished him, saying, "What a waste, I could not absorb his vital energy." Now the 4 heroes were all gone by Merlin's hand, and nothing could stop him, so he headed straight for the temple. Chapman, who was the sole survivor, stopped him and asked, "Are you Nightblade?" Merlin thought he was going to arrest him because he was still wanted, but Chapman told him, "I am your biggest fan. Can I have an autograph?" Merlin got confused and embarrassed and ran away quickly, so Chapman thought he was a shy hero. The prince in the castle still thought Merlin would come and hand over the key in exchange for Alice, so he had hope and ordered the guards to bring Alice to him. But what the prince didn't know was that Alice had actually escaped with Shirley from the dungeon. The problem was that Alice was not good at escaping, so she accidentally entered the throne hall, which was full of enemies. The prince ordered the zombies to capture Alice without killing her. Here, for the first time in her life, Alice proved she wasn't that useless. The girl started gaining confidence in herself and told the prince to surrender to her. But the prince laughed and told her his depressing story, that he was a prince for 69 years, sitting patiently and waiting for his father to die so he could become king. But before he even got close to the throne, the kingdom fell and collapsed. Alice told him that was honestly a sad topic. The prince continued and said he waited another 400 full years to restore this lost empire, to become king again. And during this period, he saw all kinds of hell and torment. That was why it was impossible for him to surrender to a half-baked hero like her. Alice, on one hand, understood his situation, but at the same time knew that there were many innocent people who died and would still die because of him, and this made him an evil person, evil enough to be called the main villain. Alice defeated all the zombies in front of her, but the prince, with utmost simplicity, summoned them again quickly. Alice ran out of mana and started wondering if Merlin would come to save her or not. Indeed, Merlin appeared with a legendary entrance, smiling sarcastically and telling Alice, "I didn't come too late, did I?" Instead of thanking him, she barked like a dog, saying, "If Nightblade were in your place, he would have saved me earlier and wouldn't have been late like this." Merlin couldn't believe she was this ungrateful. He reminded her of all the times he saved her life, yet she acted as if he never did anything for her. The old prince tried to get their attention, but they both ignored him completely and continued fighting like kids. Alice told Merlin she was able to handle the situation alone and didn't need his late dramatic entrance. Both their voices got very loud while fighting. Shirley, from afar, saw this romantic quarrel and found it cute, but the prince lost his temper and told Merlin, "Don't get arrogant just because you wiped the floor with the 4 heroes. I have an endless zombie army." Merlin looked at him with disdain and with a single sword strike wiped out all the zombies the prince summoned. Coldly, he said, "I don't have time to hit an old loser like you, so let Alice handle it. Consider it training." Alice had wanted to shut this prince up for a long time, so she drew the sword and attacked, dodging his strikes and then breaking his shield. The prince was very surprised that her sword was not normal. Alice said with pride, "This sword is named Light. It is the legendary sword." The prince tried to resist again, but she disarmed him, leaving him weaponless, and decided to hand him over to the kingdom instead of killing him. But she let her guard down for a moment and lost focus. The prince seized the opportunity and summoned a mythical beast shaped like an octopus that extended its tentacles and grabbed Shirley. Alice ran to save her, and at that moment the prince injured her with a poisoned sword with a venom that paralyzed her movement. Now, the scales tipped, and the prince thought he won because he was sure Merlin would never cut off his own hand. Merlin, instead of worrying, started mocking Alice and told her, "You are the queen of noobs, the beginners." Alice, unable to move, screamed and said, "I didn't lose. He cheated. It is your fault, Merlin, because you didn't protect Shirley and let me get distracted." Merlin replied and said, "Why should I protect someone I don't know for free?" And the two continued fighting, their voices getting louder again. The prince got fed up and said to them, "Enough flirting. I poisoned her with corpse venom, and there is no cure for it, except with me. If you want her to live, hand me the abyssal key you stole from Bernard." Merlin suddenly took the matter seriously and asked him, "Do you even know what this key does? This key opens the gate between the abyss and reality. Did you actually contact the messengers of the abyss?" The prince laughed and said, "You know about the messengers? Then how did you make a deal with them like me or what to be this powerful?" Merlin told him, "I can never be defeated by them, but it is clear you have already become an obedient dog to the messengers, or maybe to the king of the abyss himself." He kept mocking him and telling him, "Shame on you for being from the royal family and having no dignity." The prince told him, "I don't care about dignity anymore. I want absolute power only. The king promised me ultimate power and an invincible abyssal army." He confessed that he indeed made a deal with the king of the abyss himself. The prince believed that with all he did, he would be able not only to rule the continent, but the whole world would be under his feet and everyone would obey him. Then the prince grabbed Alice, dragged her, and stabbed her in the neck with his dirty fingers, demanding Merlin again to hand him the key. Alice, while hurting and bleeding, looked at Merlin and told him, "No, don't do it. If this old man takes the key, everything will be lost." But Merlin didn't listen to her and threw the key from his hand and told the prince, "Here you go. Go get it." The prince, out of greed, left Alice and ran to take the key, completely forgetting that Merlin, the strongest demon king, was standing in front of him. Merlin then helped Alice up and told her he decided to let let the prince do what he wanted to see if there was anyone from the abyssal hell army worthy of being his opponent or not. Alice got annoyed and yelled at him, saying, "Idiot! The whole world will end if the gates open." Merlin surprised her and gave her a kiss, and this kiss cured her from the poison. Alice didn't notice the cure and punched him in the face, telling him, "You are exploiting the situation to harass me." Merlin laughed and explained to her, saying, "I just kissed you to heal you. Don't you remember the time I used my saliva to heal your soul?" she asked, knowing the side effects. "So if I start hallucinating that I see Nightblade, what will happen?" Merlin replied while muttering, "You don't need to imagine, because the real Nightblade is standing in front of you." Alice tried to get out of this awkward moment quickly, so she told him, "Whatever, go save Shirley from the monster attacking her with its tentacles." Merlin surprisingly listened to her, and with a single strike from his sword, cut the monster and freed Shirley. Shirley ran to Alice, hugged her, and told her, "You kept your promise when you told me the person closest to you would come save us." Alice blushed, and Merlin, hearing this for the first time, instead of mocking her, smiled. On the other side, the prince put the key on the altar, and the abyssal gate started to open, and the whole world filled with the smell of death. Shirley couldn't handle it and fainted, while Merlin acted as if nothing was happening. Now an army of zombies started coming out of the gate, and Alice screamed at him, saying, "Do something, you idiot!" Merlin then took the matter seriously. Suddenly, he released his full power. The aura coming from him created strong shockwaves, knocking down any living being around him. Then he drew a sword and performed a single devastating strike. This strike didn't just eliminate all the undead, it also wiped the gate from existence and cleaned the whole world in a second. Alice was shocked, unable to believe Merlin was this strong. But Merlin suddenly fell into a state of depression, saying, "I just destroyed thousands of legendary rank monsters in seconds. Yet, I couldn't even absorb their power because they are undead. What a loss. If they were alive, I would have lived a king's life and slacked off comfortably." The prince, who was still alive but as a kind of dark comedy, started crying like a child, saying, "My dream collapsed. 100 years of effort gone in a second at the hands of one man." The prince screamed and asked him, "Who are you? Who brought you here?" Merlin replied with utmost coldness and told him, "A normal adventurer." He even lied and told him he followed One Punch Man's training to reach this power. The prince went crazy and said, "Impossible. Someone with this power working as an adventurer? You could rule the world easily." Merlin replied lazily and told him, "I am not into thrones or that stuff." The prince, who didn't know he was talking to the real Demon King, tried to convince him and told him, "If you become king, you will live in palaces, endless wealth, harems, beauty, everything you wish for." But Merlin, who was drowning in debt, replied sarcastically and told him, "You live in illusions. A king doesn't sit, enjoy himself. A king is drowned in work day and night, papers upon papers, and for small mistakes, the council turns against you and insults you even though you work day and night. In the end, they take the credit and call you a failed king." He continued while annoyed, saying, "Life becomes a vortex that drags you until you forget the taste of living. Even sleep becomes a distant dream. Besides, there is the mountain of debts you will never pay off. That is why I prefer being a lazy adventurer, living my life without caring about a throne or ruling a world." The ancient prince could not believe how someone could leave power and all ambition just to sleep. But it seemed that Merlin opened the eyes of this walking corpse. The prince fell to his knees, calling Merlin "my leader," which frankly was very logical since no one was able to defeat him before. Then the prince ran away, and no one knew where he was going. Merlin stood there saying, "What is up with this man anyway?" Alice saw that the old man entered a state of psychological breakdown, but at least she was happy that everything was over. Although the crisis was resolved, Merlin, Alice, and Shirley were now returning to Rixum in a horse carriage. Inside the carriage, Alice tried to open a conversation with Merlin. He thought she would thank him for what he did, so he told her, "Well, pay gold instead of words." But of course, Alice did not want to thank him at all. Why thank him when she saw he was the cause of all these calamities? She told him if he had handed the key to the kingdom from the start, they would not have gotten involved in the ancient empire's disasters, and she would not have been kidnapped or had any of this happen. Merlin let her speak and did not reply, knowing he would never win a debate with her. After a while, Alice calmed down a bit and asked him, "So why did you let the walking corpse escape?" Merlin replied very coldly and told her, "The man is useless now. He is not worth even a second of my time." But Alice insisted on chasing him, seeing that he committed many crimes and should be judged. Merlin argued with her, saying, "Let the kingdom handle it. This is not my job to be a hero. I intervened only because," and stopped suddenly. Alice caught the word and told him, "Finish your sentence, Merlin." He tried to change the subject, and he felt he had to save the situation, and definitely did not risk his life to save a lame hero like her. Although in reality, he risked his life specifically for her. These words sparked a fire between them and made them fight again. The loud voice woke Shirley. As soon as she opened her eyes and saw herself inside the carriage, she thought they sold her again. But Alice calmed her down and told her Merlin finished off the entire hell army. Shirley could not believe Big Brother Merlin was that cool. In any case, she was happy and introduced herself to Merlin and asked him innocently, "Are you truly Alice's lover?" This was because Alice kept saying all the time that Merlin would come to save her. Alice's cheeks blushed, and she did not want to admit it. Merlin seized the opportunity, laughed, and told her, "So, you were sitting crying and waiting for me to come to you?" Alice told him to shut up quickly and did not want to admit that was actually what happened. Suddenly, the carriage stopped, and Alice fell on top of Merlin. The door opened, and they found Hobbs and Rossetti standing there watching the scene. At that moment, they could not help themselves and asked, "Did you enter the honeymoon phase or what?" Afterward, everyone went to the Adventurers Guild to celebrate Alice and Merlin's big victory. Rossetti kept praising Merlin loudly, saying he risked his life to save his dear wife. At the same moment, she approached his ear and whispered, "Don't waste your youth with a nervous girl like Alice. Ride with me instead." Alice heard the words immediately, pulled Merlin away, and told her, "He is busy with me." Shirley called out to them and said, "Can I hire you for a commission to take me to my house?" Alice replied and said, "No, girl, no need for formalities. I was going to do that for free." But Merlin quickly refused and said, "I am not a charity. I won't work for free." Alice was about to kill him right then, but Shirley said, "Well, I will pay you my entire allowance as a reward, and this is a princess's allowance, 10 million gold." Alice and Merlin were shocked and froze in place. Merlin felt he won the grand prize. While he ignored Shirley all the time, suddenly he treated her with utmost respect. He even kissed her hand and told her, "Give me an official request, and I am at your service, my princess." At that time, Leticia arrived and brought them a new commission from Cecilia, who, as soon as she saw Merlin, kept screaming and asking him, "Why didn't you come to save me in the dungeon? Since you left me last time, you must help me now." Merlin had never been happier in his life, especially seeing commissions coming one after another. And with that, our story ends today. Before we finish our story, do not forget to pray upon the messenger, peace be upon him, and do not forget to like, share, and comment on the video, because this encourages us to continue. If you are new to our channel, subscribe and activate the bell button to receive everything new. See you later. He was born in a world full of magic, but the problem was that he had no magical talent at all, so he decided to become the strongest wizard by eliminating every monster in the dungeon with his sword. The story begins with our hero, Will, living in a world where magic is like a legendary treasure. But guys, our hero has bad luck because he has no magical talent. Despite that, they enrolled him in one of these luxurious academies. The big problem is, how can someone with no magic succeed in a university like this? He decided to face this problem by improving his skills with the sword and going to high-level dungeons. He faces huge monsters that attack him with magical spells, and he dodges them with terrible speed and uses his sword skills to defeat the monsters and cut them in two with a single strike. This was just a simple warm-up because he knew he had to deal with more than one monster if he wanted to get out of this dungeon alive. But it was not difficult for him because he was used to doing this many times before. The next morning, Will went to class. A professor named Edward was explaining the basics of alchemy and how to make sulfur, which helps in making explosives. Edward noticed that Will was sleeping at the back, so he called his name. But Will did not wake up and kept sleeping until Edward screamed his name loudly. Will jumped up, surprised, and Edward asked him to come to the front and show the class what they just learned. He had no escape. He had to stand before everyone and do the demonstration. Edward told him the matter was very easy. All he had to do was generate fire, and the sulfur would be created automatically. Will's hand was shaking as he took out the wand and began chanting the fire spell, but unfortunately, not a single spark came out of the wand. The whole class started laughing at him as if he were a clown, but the professor silenced them quickly. Edward looked at Will with disdain, wondering how a genius in theory could fail like this in practical magic. He was also wondering how he was accepted into this academy in the first place. Suddenly, a boy with fiery hair named Scion took out his wand with confidence and aimed it at the tools on the table. He cast a fire spell, igniting everything and creating the sulfur, while Will hid behind the fire, scared like a little kitten. Edward told Scion not to do that without permission. He immediately formed a large crystal of sulfur with his magic and started explaining to the class that magic is the most important thing in this world, and wizards are the true heroes. He emphasized that if they wanted to survive in this academy, they must be good at magic, and whoever could not control magic must leave the academy immediately. After class, Scion and his friends approached Will and tried to embarrass him, saying he could only defeat weak monsters in the dungeon. But his childhood friend Colette intervened and told them to stop, saying Will had a much better personality than them. Scion was annoyed, but held back and said that kindness and hard work would not amount to anything without magic, then walked away with his friends. Will and Colette started walking together, and Colette told him not to be upset, but he was used to this harassment. He looked up at the sky and said, "The sky looks beautiful. Years ago, humans were trapped in darkness, afraid of evil, spirits that cast shadows over the entire world. But fortunately, 5 very strong wizards named the Magyavander stood against the evil spirits, defeated them, freed the humans, and showed them the real sky. These wizards were known as the Magiavander, and this title is passed down to the strongest wizards in this world. Will thought about a promise he made to his childhood friend Elfaria, who used to read him stories about the Magiavander, and they promised each other they would become Magiavander one day. Elfaria fulfilled her promise because she was very talented. She rose through the ranks quickly and became the youngest Magiavander in history and began living in the leader's tower. Meanwhile, Will was barely keeping his dream alive, far below average, trying to fulfill that promise. On the same day, Will went to meet Professor Werkner. The professor started yelling loudly when he found out that the boy went alone to a level 7 dungeon. Werkner warned him that he might die one day if he continued like this. Will knelt on the ground and apologized profusely, asking if he would get any credits for what he did. Werkner took a deep breath and gave him 2 credits. Will started celebrating, but Werkner asked him if he still held on to his dream of becoming a Magiavander. Werkner explained that if he wanted even a small chance to become a Magiavander, he must enter the High Institute, which required many credits in writing, magic, and combat. But since he could not use magic, he would not get credits in magic, and thus, no matter how many credits he gathered in other fields, he would not qualify. Will said no matter what, he would try. Werkner told him he must graduate first, but according to his records, Will needed 4 more credits before the end of the week. This news shocked Will greatly, and he started searching for monsters that could give him those 4 credits. Werkner mentioned a monster named Baskerville on the 6th floor that no one had been able to defeat yet. Will got extremely excited and hugged his professor, but he did not notice that Scion heard everything. This made him decide to enter the dungeon himself, wanting to kill that monster before Will arrived so he could expel him from the academy for lacking credits. In the evening, Will entered the cave with his familiar Kiki and told her to use her sense of smell to find the monster. But Kiki did not like the idea because the last time Will faced Baskerville, the monster breathed fire and burned her. At the same time, Scion and his team arrived at the 6th floor, all wanting to find the monster before Will to kick him out of the academy. One of his men had strange pink hair and said it was not a good idea for only 3 wizards to enter. But Scion looked at him sharply and told him he was one of the best wizards in the class and could handle anything. He walked full of racist thoughts and anger, telling his team to use scanning magic to locate the monster. Suddenly, the giant monster appeared behind this pink-haired man and hit him so hard that he was flattened against the wall. Scion froze in place from shock, and the pink-haired man started screaming like a banshee from extreme fear. Will heard the screams and ran toward the sound because he worried someone was getting hurt. When he turned the corner, he saw Scion on the ground throwing fire at the monster, but the monster was not affected by anything. Will recognized it immediately as the evil sentinel, a very tough monster worth 10 credits. He wondered why the monster was on this floor and noticed Scion's magic had no effect on it at all, while the monster continued chasing the boy who was scared to death. Will thought about helping him, but then he thought of all the times Scion laughed at him for no reason. This made him close his eyes and pretend not to see anything. But then he remembered Elfaria, who always said he was the kindest person she knew, and she also gave him glasses as a gift. This gift returned him to his true self. He put the glasses on his face exactly when the monster raised its weapon to finish off this arrogant boy once and for all. Will blocked the monster's attack at the right time, pushed it away, and saved Scion, who was very lucky. At the same time, in the academy, he barged into Werkner's room and asked him to send his familiar immediately to the dungeon. It turned out Scion and his team entered the 6th floor without permission. Werkner understood what was happening, but told Edward not to worry, as Will was on the same floor too. Back to the dungeon, Will continued fighting the monster, dodging attacks and cutting a finger off its hand with a quick strike. The monster got angry and tried to retaliate, but Will was moving in the air like an eagle, dodging everything. In the end, the monster managed to hit him, but Will blocked the attack with his sword. The monster rushed at him and started throwing rocks, but Will cut them all easily. He was jumping around the monster, climbed onto its back, and stabbed its neck immediately. The monster started writhing, and Scion could not believe his eyes at Will's skill. Back in the academy, Edward also lost his composure. Werkner told him that Will, despite having no magic, had power beyond humans. His mind was very sharp and could learn any attack just by looking. They watched Will as he cut the monster's arm like a toy. Then he walked to the large sword on the ground and lifted it with ease. Werkner told Edward that in a world full of magic and wizards, Will was the only true warrior. The monster fired a beam from its mouth, but Will blocked it with the giant sword and chopped the monster into small pieces that fell to the ground dead. Will walked and helped Scion, while the boy was still shocked. Edward went crazy and screamed at Werkner, saying someone without magic could never surpass a wizard, then left angrily. Werkner knew Edward was very stressed, but he also knew that Will's story would become legendary and would turn things upside down in Wistoria, letting the sword and wand meet. 5 years ago, Will was a joke at school because he had no magic, and the only reason he was accepted into the school was because he was close to Elfaria. But when she became a Magiavander, Evander, the school no longer had to pretend to be nice to him. Will learned to deal with all this shadow, but he never stopped trying to graduate no matter what. Werkner went with Will to the headmistress, and she, of course, was not confident Will could prove himself. But when she gave him a sword and put him to a test, Will blocked all her fire attacks in a fraction of a second. She was surprised and told him he could stay in, tiled the school. Werkner was surprised. He did not expect it to be that easy. Will had no magic, but the headmistress was excited that he would be there and told him if he wanted to be with Elfaria again when he got stronger, he must work hard and let nothing shake him. Even so, there were no guarantees. When he left, she told him she was excited to see what he could do. Today, Will sat in Werkner's class teaching everyone about the magic tower. Climbing the tower meant going to the High Institute and reaching the top floor to become a Magiavander. Now, there are two ways to become a Magiavander: invent new magic or collect more than 7,000 credits. Let's be honest, inventing new magic is very rare, so most students focus on collecting credits. Since this was a remedial class, everyone was on the verge of failing, especially Will. After class ended, Kiki met Will and asked him how he was doing, because Werkner's remedial classes were famous for his strictness. He agreed, saying Werkner doesn't play around, but he is grateful he even cares about the remedial classes, because most professors don't care. At the same time, they saw some commotion and heard Scion and his team being praised heavily for killing the evil Sentinel. No one asked how he survived, but when Marcel woke up, he saw Scion standing next to the defeated monster, which meant Scion must have defeated it. Everyone saw Scion as cool, but in reality, Scion was pretending, and the only one who actually destroyed the monster was Will. When Scion saw Will walking, he felt personally hurt. He walked toward him to start another problem, but now it was very hard for him to see him as weak, because he knew Will could hit him with one strike and finish him. Scion left Will and walked away without saying a word. Later, Colette asked Will what happened between him and Scion because something big happened. At the same time, Edward entered Headmistress Cauldron's office as if he owned the place and told her immediately that they must expel Will from the academy right away. Cauldron asked him what made him suddenly come to expel Will like that without a reason. He was in his 6th and final year at the academy, and they couldn't expel him without a clear reason. Edward tried to convince her that Will couldn't stay in school because he was a warrior, not a wizard, and he wouldn't accept someone without magic turning out better than wizards. Cauldron pulled out Will's records and saw his grades were extraordinary, his writings excellent, and his magic reports full of deep analysis, meaning even though he couldn't use magic, he was like the ideal student. If his dream was to become a Magiavander, she saw that he could succeed in anything he chose, and it was the academy's role to graduate smart, clever people for the future. Edward said his ambition to become a Magiavander was the problem. Cauldron understood and agreed with him a bit, so she had an idea and told Edward to test Will himself. She told him if Will couldn't pass his test, then he could do what he wanted and expel him freely. Edward asked her if she was sure she wanted to leave Will's fate in the hands of his biggest hater. Cauldron told him she accepted that, and it didn't matter at all. On the contrary, she saw it would be more fun if this evil wizard was the one testing him. At this time, Will was preparing for his next class and asked Colette to help him open his locker. She did it with joy, and he apologized to her because he always made her do this for him since he had no magical skills. She told him no problem. Then she spotted Will's sword inside the locker and asked him if he was still training with it. Will told her yes, but he couldn't get permission to use it in school, and in his room, they wouldn't allow him to do anything dangerous. After that, Will and Colette went to the library to study together, and Will was very focused even though he already passed before. Colette told him, "Relax a bit, you are good at writing already." But he told her he must continue working. He couldn't afford to miss a single study hour. Also, he loved learning the history of other races, especially dwarves, because they went to fight strong wizards and didn't surrender despite difficult challenges. At that moment, Colette noticed a white hair on Will's head and said maybe it was because he stressed himself too much. She offered to pluck it for him, but he told her it wasn't necessary, but she insisted. While they were joking around a bit, Edward suddenly appeared behind Will and told him to come to him alone in the magic hall because he had something to discuss. A little later, Will arrived at the magic hall. Edward told him he prepared a special remedial class for him and he should be grateful. Will was very surprised because he didn't expect Edward to offer him something like this. But this was proof that his intention was not pure. He wanted to know what he was really up to, so he started giving him warnings to let him know that the matter was very serious. Edward said if Will landed one hit, he would get 5 magic credits, but if he failed, he would be expelled immediately. He also clarified he couldn't refuse the test. Edward started throwing spells at him. Will started dodging the spells, but Edward was using weak, dark magic. Will was surprised by the power Edward showed and had to find a way to counter. He tried to kick him from behind, but Edward blocked it easily with a magic shield. The shield was very strong, and Will couldn't break it without a weapon. Then Edward destroyed him with a spell. Will started worrying that he might not be able to defeat Edward this way. Edward told him he would use 2 spells, only only 1 fire attack and 1 defense. Against Will's weak moves, even with just 1 spell, a professional in it could be stronger than someone who knows 1,000 spells. Will started running trying to escape, but Edward caught him and hit him. It was clear he was very happy, as if conducting a symphony of Will's screams. Will fell to the ground and realized he couldn't defeat Edward this way. If he had his sword, he could at least stand against him. Outside the magic hall, Colette was putting her stuff in her locker, very worried about Will, because she understood that Edward's request to come alone wasn't good. Suddenly, Kiki came running, covered in Will's blood, going to get his sword from the locker. Colette understood that something bad had happened. She opened the locker for him, gave it to him, and he was on the ground. Edward approached him, saying he would not be a Magiavander if he couldn't surpass him now. He told him magic is always superior. Even when the dwarves fought the wizards, just one was enough to finish them off. But Will, despite all odds, wanted to be a Magiavander and would do anything to achieve that. Edward was surprised by his enthusiasm and asked him if he had a noble goal. Will told him he wanted to be beside the girl he loved. Edward told him that was a stupid reason, but Will was thinking of Elfaria and wanting to watch the sunset with her. At this moment, Colette arrived at the magic hall and threw the sword to Will. Armed at last, he managed to block the fire spell. Edward was surprised by this, but he understood the reason. Will's sword was special. Will, despite his fear of Edward's fire, faced him and began to attack, dodging all his attacks. When he got close, he cut through Edward's barrier and injured him on his cheek. Edward was forced to admit that Will passed the test and gave him 5 credits. Will collapsed on the ground from exhaustion, and Colette ran to congratulate him, but he had fallen into a deep sleep. Cauldron praised Will's performance, and Professor Werkner said that his attack strategies were genius, and his sword strike was strong enough to break a shield. He might really have the potential to become a Magiavander. Will thought about the time Elfaria left the tower before she went, and he promised her he would climb the tower someday, even without magic, and they would watch the sunset together. His tears fell, and he told Werkner this was the last time he would cry like this. After that, Will started working distributing newspapers in the city to make a living. He met a man named Dunnan who encouraged him and told him he would see him at Gina's place tomorrow. Will kept walking and almost fell, but used his supernatural skills to prevent the newspapers from falling, except one. He took the newspaper and read it, discovering that Elfaria invented 12 new types of magic. He felt she was working hard, and this motivated him to work hard too. He also saw that she made a request to the academy. The scene changed to Will's room in the dorm, asking Rosti to make him a magical item. Rosti was surprised by his speed as he changed his clothes. He told him Elfaria made a request and he would skip classes and go to the dungeon to collect ice cores from ice walkers. He told him this magical item would help him explore the 4th floor. Rosti saw the enthusiasm in Will's eyes and couldn't say no, so he handed him the item and told him he made improvements from last time. Will thanked him, and before leaving, Rosti threw him a piece of bread for breakfast. A little later, he started explaining how the witch queen Mercedes used to say that everything comes from the dungeon, and she always encouraged everyone to conquer it and benefit from its knowledge. After that, we see Will walking to the 4th level of the dungeon. He saw some students dealing with Frostwalker monsters and deduced it was all because of Elfaria's orders. He was amazed at how she could gather all these people with just one word. He also noticed Scion in the middle, hitting Frostwalkers with his fire spells. Scion thought these small enemies wouldn't strengthen him and remembered how strong Will was when he faced the Sentinel before. Will sensed Scion's power and thirst for battle and knew he wouldn't be able to get any Frostwalkers in this place, so he decided to continue deeper into the dungeon. There he saw monsters attacking a female student. He pounced on them and finished them in an instant, so fast that the girl couldn't comprehend what happened. In the end, the girl noticed Will and understood that what happened in front of her was not magic. It was very solid sword work. Will made sure she was okay, and she told him shyly she was fine and thanked him for saving her. Then each introduced themselves. Will introduced himself, and the girl said she was Iris Churchill, a student in the 4th year. The scene shifts then to inside the academy, where Professor Werkner is teaching in a class and seeing some students leaving because of Elfaria's orders. The professor explained to the students that in this world, inventing new magic is a very big deal and allows the creator to advance to the tower without conditions. He also told them that new magic is often named after its creator, like the Dax, Draken's spell, which was named after the ancient wizard Drakens. He told them if they could create new magic, they would leave their mark on history. The students thought it was easy, but knew well it wasn't. Rose spoke about the news. They read earlier about Elfaria and that she made 12 new spells, saying this must be something amazing. The professor replied to her saying this was an unprecedented achievement no one had done before, and Elfaria might become the greatest witch in the history of the entire world. The whole class started thinking if this meant ice magic was now king, and started thinking of joining the ice faction. Will said his childhood friend was awesome, and everyone in the academy was excited excited because of her. Rose couldn't stop herself from thinking if she was jealous of Elfaria, or that she was afraid Will would be influenced by her. Colette became tense from this talk, and the professor scolded them for the noise. Colette wondered if Will went to the dungeon today just for Elfaria. At the same time in the dungeon, Iris discovered that Will was the scholar student who had no magical skills she heard about before. Will felt a bit insulted and got to know Iris more and learned she was a fourth-year student. He started thinking if his lack of magic bothered her, but she told him spontaneously that she would not look down on him and said that he might not know how to use magic, but he had another talent, and she respected him for that. Will was confused by her calm manner and wondered if she was here because of Elfaria's orders too. Iris confirmed it to him and said she wanted to help the Magiavander and play her role in holding up the sky. Will explained to her that this talk was not exaggerated and that people in this world never saw the real sky. The sky they saw now was a huge barrier placed by the Magiavander with their strong magic. The legend said that if this barrier fell, darkness would swallow the world and a great disaster would occur. The students did not execute orders from the tower only because they admired the Magiavander, but because they felt they were playing their role in protecting the barrier. Iris told him she met Elfaria before and explained it happened when she was alone in the dungeon and surrounded by monsters. Will wondered if this always happened to her. Iris said that at that time she was in a difficult situation and surrendered to her fate, but suddenly El froze all the monsters in an instant, helped her up, and told her to be careful next time. Iris got excited remembering this moment and said that. After that, they talked a lot together. Then Kiki noticed something and Will went to check it while Iris continued talking. Iris said she wanted to help Elfaria, but until now she had not found any frost walkers. She thought maybe other students took all the monsters before. Her search ability was not finding anything, so she asked Will what he was doing. Will told her that frost walkers left ice shards in their path, usually half a meter to a meter in size, but he noticed a shard twice as big. He deduced there was a big frost walker ahead of them, perhaps in a place her ability did not reach. Iris was surprised how Will knew all this when he did not know magic. Will told her magic was nice, but not everything, especially in the dungeon. He could compensate for his lack of magic with his experience and wit. Then he prepared his magical tool. Suddenly, Will saw the frost walker on the ceiling and managed to save Iris before the monster attacked them. It turned out this was not just any frost walker. It was a frost rex, and Iris explained it was an evolved version of frost walkers. The monster started roaring at them. Iris also said this monster was worth 6 credits and was the boss of the floor they were on. The monster started firing beams at them, but Will dodged them like a hero with Iris beside him. Will put Iris on the ground and tried to face the monster directly, but Iris stopped him and told him physical attacks would not affect the monster, she said. Also, this monster was known as the Dwarf Killer and could freeze anyone with one touch, but he was confident and told her not to worry because he defeated this monster many times before. The monster tried to freeze him, but Will ignited the wire tied to the monster, which had a bomb at the end. The monster exploded and crumbled. Will felt that Rosty's magical tools were very cool. Iris's personality changed, and she started looking at the matter seriously and wondered how the rumors were different from the truth about Will. She did not know whom to report what happened to. Will suggested they leave the place after achieving their goal. Iris returned to her happy nature and agreed with him. The scene then cut to Iris entering a room in the tower, identifying herself as Mercedes while changing her form as she walked. It was revealed she was disguised in the academy to monitor talented wizards. First, she entered a room and found 4 of the 5 Magiavander gathered. She wondered if she was interrupting them, but one name. Cariot reassured her and told her everything was fine, because if this barrier was breached, the whole world would be in ruins now. Zio said the leaders were watching them from the other side, but did not have the numbers or power to finish them. Eleanor said they needed elite wizards for the Day of Gloom. Otherwise, all these fears would become a reality on the ground. They asked the Watcher if she found anyone worthy to join them. Iris said in her search, she found one with no talent, but who truly deserved to join, and she named Will and suggested he enter the tower. Cariot and Eleanor disliked the idea of inviting someone with no talent, but Zio saw the matter as interesting. Eleanor said she did not want any weaklings around her. Zio told them they were too strict. Cariot said that even if there were a tough dwarf, he might let him into the tower. Eleanor got angry because she said elves and dwarves did not get along and wondered how someone like Zio could become a Magiavander. Cariot interrupted the argument and said there was no need to rush because the Grand Magic Festival was approaching and they could make the decision there. Zio agreed and said talented people would reach the top on their own, and if they didn't, then really their talent was not enough. Then he left and the others followed him. Elfaria remained alone, and Iris told her that the boy she spoke about was amazing. Elfaria held the magic core Will collected and said she would wait for him. The next test for the students was against golems. If you killed one, you passed the test. Scion and Colette were the first 2 and they broke. broke their golems easily. Will found difficulty with his golem. He tried to run after the golem to hit it, but when the students saw him attacking with his hands, they started mocking him for not using magic. This distracted him enough, and the golem knocked him back with a hit to his face. The students started walking away, happy with Will's failure. On the other side, there were some students who had no problems with the golems, like Liana and Wignall, and they passed the test easily. Another student started casting ice magic and turned all the golems into ice pieces. This was Julius, one of the top 3 in the academy. Liana thanked Wignall and Julius for their performance and that they did not slack off. Julius said he wanted to declare war on them and use his ultimate technique to defeat them when the time came. As a gift, he offered an ice rose, but Liana and Wignall were not interested, while Scion was excited for the challenge. These 3 were famous in the school, and each of them earned more than 10,000 out of 12,000 points. Will was not even close. Now he did not even have enough points to graduate, and this was his last year. Will sat thinking about what to do, while Julius and his friends came to him and mocked his inability to use magic. Will avoided trouble, and as Scion heard them talking about the Grand Magic Festival, Will had not realized that the time had already come. Later at lunch, Colette came to Will and told him that the best thing to do if he wanted to become a Magiavander was to stand out in the Magic Festival, because relying on training and writing alone would not be enough. There were students picked without having 7,000 points needed for graduation. The Grand Festival happened every 2 years and was full of events, and the Magiavander watched the new students. All factions competed to choose the best students. Will did not see himself having a chance because he was a failure. Now he wanted to stay behind the scenes and help with preparations. Colette told him he could change the opinion of people about him if he entered the festival and showed them his abilities. But Will was still hesitant, remembering the time he entered in his second year, and they mocked him because he used physical attacks. All the students were working hard for the festival. Colette reminded him that there were watchers who might come looking for talent. Will thought it was a fairy tale and that he did not deserve to participate. Suddenly, Colette saw something unnatural at one of the lockers and told him there was a sound and sight barrier. Will was surprised, but she said she could break it. Like that, she broke the barrier, and they found secret stairs leading to a gambling cellar under the floor. There were students gambling on bets on who would win the festival. Will noticed Sion standing there, surprised because he was not the type to like gambling. Sion started shouting at him, but Colette stopped him and assured him that if he tried to attack, she would make him regret it. Sion walked away, and Will asked him again what he was doing there, but he did not want to answer and did not care that people did not see him winning. The day continued normally. After classes, Will wanted to leave, but Colette held him and asked him to hang out after school, even if just to enter the dungeon together. But Will had work at the restaurant, Gina's. He worked as a waiter, carrying a tray full of food and drinks to Dunnan. Dunnan felt for him because his life schedule was hard. Will woke up early to distribute newspapers, spent the day at school, and then worked at night. Gina screamed at him from the kitchen to get back to work, saying Rosti was working harder than him. The restaurant was crowded, and the work piled up on Will unless Gina brought someone to help. After the rush calmed down, Will and Rosti were doing the dishes. Rosti asked him if he was truly comfortable working there because the salary was not big, and he could go to Workner to find him a better job, but he did not want to bother him and also liked the work there. Suddenly, Julius entered the restaurant just to cause trouble. As soon as he entered, he mocked the restaurant and the dwarf workers. Julius noticed Will and laughed at him, making offensive comments that he was just a loser. This upset Dunnan, but the rest of the dwarves held him back. Julius continued and told them they were just refugees who arrived after the leaders destroyed their world, and that humans allowed them to live, so dwarves had no right to speak to him. Dunnan tried to calm himself because he knew he could not do anything now, but he could not stand the injustice, so he decided that today was his last day of work there. Now, after finishing his work with Gina, Will was free to do what he wanted without Gina getting involved. The first thing on his mind was to walk straight to Julius's table and tell him to take back the ridiculous words he said about dwarves. Dwarves worked very hard and did the best they could in the most difficult situations, so Julius had no right to call them barbarians. Julius, of course, did not care about dwarves or their problems, and simply threw his plate at Will and signaled 2 of his followers to get up and beat him. They did not realize that throwing this plate counted as an assault, so anything Will did now was considered self-defense. Will grabbed the 2 by their shirts and threw them on the ground very hard. Julius was shocked and got covered in food, which was a big blow to his dignity. Of course, he would not let him get away, so things started getting heated when Julius took out his wand and began attacking with magic. Will started dodging the ice spells without his sword while trapped in a tight space. Julius finally managed to corner him and pin him to the wall. Julius approached to freeze Will completely, and Rosti was on edge, almost ready to stand by Will and save him. But Julius wanted to see Will beg for his life before he acted. But Will's eyes held no fear, so Julius decided to change his plan. Instead of freezing Will, now he wanted to humiliate him in front of everyone at the Grand Magic Festival. Will agreed to meet Julius at the festival. Julius threw down the gauntlet. If he won, Will would be expelled from school. If Will won, he wanted an apology from Julius for insulting the dwarves. Finally, the day of the Grand Magic Festival arrived, and the atmosphere was full of excitement. Everyone was eager to see how the students were doing. The Fire Faction scout was nervous and told his friends to watch for any rising star, because who knows who might become a maestro at Magia Vander School. The first big challenge was the dragon races, and Colette was playing very hard, holding the lead. It was very easy for her, and people were not just talking about the race. The whole audience was tense and focused on the event. And also there were a group of recruiters coming from the tower and outside the school, all wanting the best talents. Colette won the race in record time. Then we came to the Crown Attack Challenge, and Scion appeared intending to participate, feeling great confidence, especially after Colette chose him to join her team and saw how strong he was. They wanted to work with him and did not want to deal with the failure Will again. But as soon as Scion entered the training room, he was surprised by Will's presence there too. Colette quickly explained to him that she needed Scion and Will on the team together because Will's points were very low, and without Scion, the team could not qualify for Crown Attack. Will tried to apologize to Scion for getting him into his problem, but Scion was not pleased. Why should he help Will? How did Will think of entering a high-level challenge like Crown Attack? Suddenly, while Scion was yelling at Will, he found Will not focused on him at all. His eyes were all on Julius, not caring about Scion or his words. Colette intervened and clarified that something happened between Julius and Will, and this was the reason Will was determined to compete in Crown Attack no matter what. This increased Scion's anger more. How could Will ignore him after all that happened in the dungeon? As the next event was about to start, commentator Mike introduced himself with his colleague, Edward. Mike was not very happy because Edward was the strictest and most dangerous professor in the school, and everyone feared him. Honestly, Mike was almost sure Edward might hit him before the festival ended, but the program must go on. Mike ignited the enthusiasm of the audience to see the main event of the day, Crown Attack. Magic was realized as the entire stadium transformed into a huge battlefield containing volcano zones, swamp, wasteland, meadow, and forest. Crown Attack is different from other events. It is a team challenge of 3 members. All teams start from the edge of the arena and fight to reach the central field, where there is a giant crown. Whoever reaches it first is the winner, but it is not easy. The whole field is full of traps. Teams could take the short path or try to stop other teams on the way. It would be unnatural action. Edward explained to everyone that this event was a practical test of the team's ability to raid the dungeon. But honestly, no one cared about teamwork. They all wanted to see the strongest students fighting. The least liked team by the audience was Will's team. The students laughed at Will because he thought he could compete in Crown Attack. But Will now did not fear nor lose his confidence when the participants arrived at the starting point. Werkner was shocked that Will was serious about the challenge. He tried to stop him, but he knew Will had decided from the start, and no words could change his mind. Will apologized to Werkner for not listening to his advice, but he was determined to win the challenge no matter how much they mocked him. Werkner accepted the situation and reminded him that he was warned about the risk, and if anything happened, Will would bear the responsibility. At the start of the event, the students ran forward. Julius's team were the first to fall into some traps in the arena. The cubes activated and formed an army of golems in front of Julius. The number of golems was very large, and it was difficult for any student, but Will ran at full speed, not showing signs of slowing down. The students mocked him because he wanted to break the golems without magic, while he was incapable of defeating a single golem in training. But Will did not surrender. He signaled Colette, and she created a magic gauntlet for him. With this gauntlet, Will destroyed all the golems in his path. The audience stood amazed by Will's abilities. Werkner expected this. As long as Will used the magic gauntlet, he could deal massive damage without his sword. The gauntlet was made by Colette, meaning officially it was not against the rules. He broke the expectations of all bets and was the first to pass the golem army and aim for the crown. Scion was still stuck on the moment Will saved him, considering it one of his worst moments. Despite all his effort, Will still outperformed him without magic. Will and his team took a significant lead in Crown Attack. If the other teams did not hurry, they would remain far behind. Will reached the wastelands and cube traps activated, shooting rocks at him. Will did not flinch. He hit the ground with the magic gauntlet and created a rock wall to protect himself. Without stopping, he jumped forward and asked for Colette's help. She cast a spell for him that summoned 12 swords. Will used them very well and destroyed the cubes in his path. Mike was excited as he announced that Will's team crossed the wastelands easily. Their team was working in harmony, even though Scion was not helping much. The audience who bet against Will tried to downplay his abilities, saying Colette's magic was what did all the work. True, her magic helped, but the technique Will used was what made the weapons effective. Even the scouts began noticing Will's skill in detecting and facing traps. Even Edward, who forced himself to admit it, had to respect Will's effort. All the hours he spent in the dungeons improved his movement to perfection. His reactions were very effective, and he exploited every small opportunity. At the same time, another team got excited by their hatred for Will and fell into a flower trap that ate them. The rest of the teams were suffering from the same traps, but Will and his team were still holding the lead. These events caused a huge stir in the stadium. Even Julius, who was not close now, heard the noise and asked his team for news. They performed a detection spell and confirmed that the one leading by a large margin was Will's team. Julius knew they needed to move fast or Julius might lose, but Julius was not very tense. He had a plan to deal with Will. At the same time, Will and his team arrived at the final area before the arena, the Enchanted Forest. Will held the lead, started triggering many magic circles, and discovered he was trapped in a trap of interlocking circles. But Will was not worried. He had the perfect way to handle it. If all the spells activated at the same time, he would make them explode into each other. He started digging around every magic circle and modifying. Indeed, the spells exploded into each other and he cleared them. Mike was very excited and announced that Will passed the traps in the forest as if it was child's play. He could not help picking on Edward and asking his opinion, since Edward was the one who planned this dark magic trap. Edward clicked his tongue, clearly annoyed, because Will managed to escape his traps so easily, despite all the momentum Will gained, which kept him far ahead. The closer he got to the stadium, the higher the probability of meeting another team trying to take him down increased. He had already eliminated several teams before, but there was one team Will had his eyes on. Will intended to get ahead of them and ambush Julius, but while he was walking to control the high ground, the tables turned against him. Suddenly, Julius appeared from nowhere, throwing an ice spike at him. Will dodged well. The strike didn't hit him directly, but he didn't understand how Julius arrived so fast after all, the big lead they had. Also, the fact that Julius was alone made the matter worse. Will was now on high alert, knowing that Julius's teammates might be hiding, waiting to ambush him. Julius started throwing many ice spikes at Will, and Will was forced to flee now. He knew he needed to get serious and try to take down Julius, but then Scion decided to enter the situation, literally lighting it up with heavy fire. But Colette noticed that Scion's eyes were focused on Will more than necessary and warned him that Scion might be plotting against him. As soon as Scion released the magic, Colette threw a rock wall in front of Will so he wouldn't get burned. The explosion created a huge shockwave on the field, and Will remained a bit confused. And when he regained focus, he found the forest around them completely burned. Scion came to him at his leisure and said that Julius was on the way, and maybe he could have also taken down Julius if Colette hadn't stopped him. Colette asked Scion, "What exactly are you doing?" But Scion saw himself as right. He played along with Colette's request and joined their team so Will could enter the event, and now he wanted to return the favor with a battle, one-on-one. Will did not understand at all why Scion suddenly wanted to kill him, and why now specifically, but Scion did not want to explain and fired a warning shot at Will. Colette tried to intervene, but before she could make it, Julius, who miraculously was still alive after the fire explosion, stood in front of her with an ice wall. Colette was now trapped, and Will wanted to run to help her, but Scion would not leave him any room until he finished the fight he desired. He threw some fireballs at Will and knocked his sword from his hand. Will tried to calm Scion and told him they could solve the issue later, but Scion was not listening. He demanded Will pick up his sword and face the fight. Will had no other solution, so he agreed to face him. A long time ago, when Will and Scion were still students in the academy, Will was the weakest person imaginable. All the people who used to bother him and stick paper on his back with "worthless" written on it. Scion could not stand seeing that and decided to intervene in his strange way. He burned the paper and told Will he would allow him to be his follower so he wouldn't feel lonely or worthless. But Will coldly ignored the words and walked away, and this upset Scion very much. Even then, Scion went and shook him and asked for a reply, and Will, with his empty eyes, told him, "Leave me." Scion in the end withdrew, and his anger doubled. And today, Scion was attacking Will with fire in the forest, and Will ran and tried to dodge the attacks. Scion walked behind him very stubbornly and created a fire whip. Will tried to block the attack, but his sword started to heat up from the heat. Scion got angry and told him, "Will you just keep running, or do you intend to face me?" Will still did not want to fight his colleague and told him, "We are on the same team. I am not free to fight you now. I am focused on the competition." Scion got angrier and told him he would burn him to ash and continued his attack. Will ran and dodged everything and wondered if he really had to fight his colleague. The whole audience in the stadium could not believe what they were seeing. Even Edward, with a sarcastic smile, said that a fight between colleagues was the worst thing in the competition, and this would make the observers rate them negatively, which made him happy in a weird way. At the same time, Rosti His roommate sat very worried, and suddenly Iris appeared and sat next to him. They met before, and Rosti could not believe when Iris started cheering for Will. She admitted she was not interested in him before, but after seeing him fight, she became his biggest fan. On the other side, Colette tried to escape from Julius and reach Will and Scion. Julius mocked her, asking her if she would fight or not. Colette got very angry at the title he gave her, Princess of the Earth, and replied and told him, "You hero." He attacked her with an ice attack, and she protected herself with a rock wall, but then she noticed a magic circle beneath her and discovered she fell into a trap. A huge dark magic explosion hit her immediately, and the audience was in a state of shock. But what really surprised everyone was Julius appearing on all screens facing all teams at the same time, and no one understood how he existed everywhere. Julius also went to Wignall's team and reminded him of the promise he took from him that he would destroy everyone with his secret weapon. Wignall responded with magic, known to Julius, an ice rose, which Julius had learned from him before. The rose distracted Julius's attention, and a magic circle appeared under his feet, and suddenly he was trapped in a tornado. But it turned out that was just a clone of Julius, made of ice and magic stones, and it crumbled from Wignall's attack. The whole audience was in amazement of Wignall's performance, but Finnis, one of the elf leaders, was not impressed. To her, Wignall was very normal. His level barely reached their level. At the same time, the whole audience was confused about who would win now. They thought Will's team would win, but Scion's betrayal turned the world upside down. Will's colleagues were surprised, and even Will did not understand why Scion was obsessed with him like this. He remembered the days he was bullied, and everyone used to disrupt his work for laughs. It was a hard time, and all he wanted was to stay alone. And when Scion came that day, all he said was, "Leave me," and he didn't understand his intentions. Now Scion was attacking him the same way. Will dodges the attacks and chose to run. Scion did not give up. He cast a powerful spell and summoned a fire falcon. Will was shocked not just by the sight, but more when Scion ordered the falcon to attack him. Will focused, cut the falcon's wing, drew his sword, and ran towards Scion, thinking this was his chance to finish the fight. The falcon regenerated the wing and continued the attack. Will knew he must destroy the falcon's heart to stop it. This was not safe given the fire the falcon was throwing, so he ran and dodged while Scion attacked him from every side. Will blocked with the magic gauntlet, but was pushed back, and fatigue showed on him. Scion was not in a better state either. Everyone was surprised by his performance because with his skill in controlling the fire, he appeared above the level of any normal student. Even the fire faction scouts were interested despite the betrayal of Scion to his team. Their data predicted he would not reach the level of the top 3 students. But today, the performance made everyone rethink. The leader of the scouts was convinced that something pushed Scion to surpass his limits and decided to notify the Magia Vander immediately. Will was on his knees, realizing Scion's great power. Scion provoked and asked if that was all he had, reminding him he was stronger when he fought the giant monster. Will tried to understand why Scion was doing this and did not understand why they had to fight. Scion got upset and asked him how he could say that after all that happened, accusing him of showing no anger or hatred even after all the bullying. Will admitted he was angry and hated him, but insisted that the focus now was on Julius. Mentioning Julius made Scion erupt and tell him to stop ignoring him. Will finally understood that in his twisted way, Scion just wanted his acknowledgement and attention. Will put on his action glasses and prepared, determined to give Scion everything he had. Scion was excited and began creating his strongest spell with the Fire Falcon. Will knew he could not launch a weak attack. He watched Scion closely and prepared a counterattack. Suddenly, Scion launched the Falcon and threw some huge fireballs. Will's eyes widened at the size of the attack, but he focused on the path of the balls and ran between them quickly, cutting the Falcon's heart with precision and ran towards Scion. Scion attacked him with a close-range attack, but before their attacks met, a rock wall suddenly appeared between them and stopped the fight. Will collided with the wall, and Scion was surprised. Colette intervened and asked them to stop. Colette's clothes were all torn from her battle with Julius, and she said proudly that she finished him, but suddenly he disappeared. Scion was surprised and tried to blame her for her appearance, but she didn't want to hear it. She insulted him, said all this was his fault, and told Will to move because he had business with Julius while she dealt with the one here. Scion was angry and said he wouldn't let her interfere, but Will replied to him and told him he was selfish and stupid. Will covered her with his cloak and thanked her in a sincere way that made her blush. Will grabbed his sword and ran, telling Scion, "We will finish the story later." At the same time, Julius and his team were the first to enter the stadium. The announcer announced them as undefeated heroes. Suddenly, Will appeared with rocket speed and landed behind Julius and his team, and the audience was totally surprised. Will locked eyes with Julius and challenged him to a fight. Julius, who was waiting for this moment, smiled and prepared for the battle. The scene then shifted to Elfaria, sitting in her room at the top of the tower, and a woman named Sarissa entered to talk to her. Sarissa quickly noticed that Elfaria was sleeping and did not hesitate to wake her with a hit on her head, telling her to act with dignity and think of her status, pointing out that she was always sleeping or dreaming of the bottom of the tower. Afterward, a bit cranky from fatigue, Elfaria asked Sarissa what she wanted. Sarissa handed her a pile of papers and told her to take her time and look at them. These papers contained the nominations brought by the scouts. Sarissa said with a smile that this year they brought very good people and focused on Julius specifically, saying he was very suitable for the Ice faction and also that he was putting on a strong show in the game right now. Sarissa also suggested that he might be worthy to be Elfaria's successor. Elfaria thought a little and said to herself it might be that Sarissa was right if the information about Julius was truly accurate. The scene then shifted to Will as he prepared himself to face Julius in the games. Mike, the excited announcer, announced that Will would face all 3 members of Team 9. Julius was smiling and said he was relieved he arrived in time. He admitted he was afraid he would win by forfeit, then laughed and said it wouldn't be fun if he couldn't defeat him with some humiliation in front of the people. Will, without backing down, told Julius he didn't intend to lose until he made him apologize to Dunnan and the others. Julius just laughed and said all. His talk was no action and called him just a rat. With style, Julius started showing off his ice magic and created a thick fog that covered the arena quickly. Will, being cautious, tried to sense the magical presence of the other people inside the fog and started thinking if they intended to cast spells on him. He quickly understood that they were moving around him, probably wanting to surround him. Suddenly, an ice spell came at Will from behind, but he dodged it at the last moment. Knowing he couldn't stay in his place, he started moving and also dodged 2 similar attacks. He thought he now knew their locations, so he tried to hit Julius. But the moment he moved, a new ice attack came from an unexpected direction, and Will was very surprised. Julius, smiling arrogantly, he revealed that neither he nor his team moved from their spots, and Will immediately realized the truth. What he was tracking were merely clones of Julius, and everyone was surprised when 5 identical clones of Julius appeared before them. Will was surprised and asked himself if this was a trick, but understood it was real. Julius laughed an evil laugh and said that these clones were not just for show, they could also explode. Suddenly, the clone closest to Will exploded, and Will managed to protect himself from the worst part of the explosion, but found himself trapped inside a block of ice. Even Edward was shocked when he saw the 4 clones and realized the spell they were using. Werkner recognized the spell and said it was one of Elfaria's secret creations, part of a legendary magic series called Ars Weiss, and explained that Elfaria's genius lay in 12 original spells she created herself, and each one was a masterpiece. Julius was using one of them called Ars Weiss. Will recognized the spell immediately. This was a spell that created clones, completely alive of the person casting it. Will was amazed and asked how Julius could use the same magic as Elfaria. Julius laughed arrogantly and said this was all thanks to his great talent, and boasted that he mastered the spell alone. Although it was the first in the series, he bragged that he reached the level of a Magiavander. With disdain, he said Elfaria was nothing special, and even announced that one day he would make her lose everything. Will got angry at the insult, broke the ice trapping him, and rushed at Julius. Immediately, Julius and his clones retaliated with a large snowball attack, but Will cut them easily. Julius continued, casting spells, and boasted that he could move the clones as he pleased and make them cast spells independent. Julius's team said confidently that Will would lose. He remained standing in place, and then Julius stopped the direct attacks and used the clones to trap Will in a magical barrier. Will tried to break it and hit it with all his might, but the barrier held and trapped him. Julius, smiling, said he would hunt a wild animal while angry, then threw a huge ice boulder and said this would end the battle. The audience in the arena was shocked by the power, and Mike announced that Julius won the battle without even moving from his spot. Even Edward was amazed and found this control to be the ideal for all wizards. Julius held a wand and used it like a microphone, telling the scouts that he was mastering Elfaria's spell alone, then boldly announced he would be Elfaria's successor, leaving the students surprised. People murmured and said no one could defeat him if he could use Magiavander magic. But Iris saw the whole game and said that Julius exploited Will's superhuman strength to make himself look tough. She admitted his cunning, but Rosti said it would be funny if he lost now. Conversely, Will broke the ice. Boulder and Julius was shocked. Will thanked Julius for the spell and told him it helped cool his head, and admitted he got a little angry when the topic concerned Elfaria. Julius was annoyed hearing him speak like that and said he would finish him this time. Julius and his team attacked again, but Will dodged all the spells and took out Julius's team in a single strike. Edward understood the tactic and knew it was the same method Will used against him. The audience went crazy with excitement, and Julius's clones began began to collapse. And Will explained that Julius relied on his friends to control the clones, and that was the only reason he could use the spell for a short time. He added that Julius was very far from Elfaria's level. In the tower, Elfaria, watching from afar, thought that Julius might have the potential to be a successor if the reports were correct, but she herself wanted someone beside her to be a sword, not a successor. Will said Ars Weiss was not what people imagined, and explained that these clones were subject completely to control, and if his friends were not present, Julius could not have controlled them. Julius raged while speaking to someone he considered talentless, and replied by launching roses at Will. Will cut them easily, but Julius made the roses explode. Will protected himself, and Julius, without stopping, summoned 4 more clones, and they started throwing spells at him from all directions. Will either dodged or blocked every attack. Julius admitted he was not skilled enough to control 4 clones without his friends, and knew the spell would drain him quickly, but he was confident Will would not know how to differentiate between the real and fake clones. While laughing at the idea that Will would be helpless against the spell, Julius was surprised when Will rushed at him directly. Julius, in horror, built an ice wall to block the attack, but Will broke it easily with the sword, and pieces of ice flew at Julius. Julius was shocked and asked Will how he knew the real one. Will calmly explained that the body temperature of the clones in the Ars Weiss spell is unlike the person using the spell, 36 or 37 degrees Celsius, and sometimes less if the spell is not perfect. If the wizard is not controlling the clones well, cold emits from them like ice crystals around their legs. Julius confirmed his words while amazed, and all the clones collapsed in front of him. Julius got confused and angry and asked himself how someone like Will could know about the spell more than him. Will, with a nostalgic smile, revealed he knew all this because Elfaria was his friend from childhood days, and they were raised in the same orphanage after being abandoned. That was why he understood her magic very well and admired it, even though he never reached her level. Elfaria called from the tower and reassured him that his memories and hard work would never be lost. Will stood before Julius and told him calmly that he knew all the strengths and weaknesses in Elfaria's magic. Julius exploded with anger, saying he would not allow a person with no talent like Will to mock Magiavander magic, and attacked Will with ice spells, but Will cut them easily with the sword. Back to Will, who finally started thinking if his friends might hate each other. Suddenly, without any introduction, Liana came to talk to him. Liana, whom everyone called Miss Perfect, was one who stood above everyone and was opposite to Will in everything. Will was surprised and did not understand what exactly she wanted, but Liana simply told him to follow her. He walked behind her until they reached a strange house and found a group of the best academy students gathered there. This was their last year, meaning the time had come for collective training for all students. Liana suddenly told him she wanted to form a team of 5 members. Julius and Sion looked shocked, as if they had seen a ghost, and could not understand why Liana wanted to invite Will at all. Will knew well that these two probably hated him the most. He saw the terrified look on her face, because she misunderstood and thought he hesitated and refused her offer. This confirmed to Will that they were reckless. Sion could not stay silent and rushed toward him to object, but before he could do anything, Wignall showed off his magical power and changed the entire place around them. Arrogantly, he mocked them, saying that wizards were far from the primitive nature of dwarves. This made Sion shut up immediately. Wignall's magic was not just any ordinary magic. It was illusion magic, a rare type that created imaginary landscapes, a skill found only among elves. After things calmed down, Wignall turned his attention back to Liana, wanting to know what else she wanted to say. Liana explained her goal simply. She wanted to make a team for training in the room. She wanted to gather with the strongest 4 wizards and the person who stood out most in the festival, and she was convinced Will had something the team needed, something that could give them an advantage in the room. Julius immediately objected and said Will could not use search magic and would slow them down. Sion, who was recently on a team with Will, said quickly he did not want to go through that annoying experience again. Wignall intervened and said Julius and Sion were just spiteful because they lost to Will, but Will was still resentful. Wignall explained to them the truth they did not see. Will had the physical strength of dwarves and the flexibility of beasts. His fighting style was surely not elegant, but his sword managed to defeat their wands. Julius disagreed and replied angrily that Wignall was still ranked lower in evaluation than him. Wignall considered this a reason to respect Liana's judgment more. If she saw potential in Will, then he was ready to respect the person they said had no talent. This was more than what was said about the other two, which made them angrier. Liana then stated the real reason. She wanted to use all their power to top the tower as the best student. She wanted fame, respect, and a better future. Even after becoming known in the festival and securing a guaranteed spot after graduation, this was not enough for her. In her family, people died young, and to prevent the decline, Liana needed to achieve extraordinary results. Just climbing the tower was not enough. She needed to become a Magiavander. She was confident confident everyone had their ambition. Liana offered a deal. Everyone put a coin in the cup if they agreed to her plan. Wignall did not hesitate. No other team could achieve better results. Julius needed more points, so he agreed reluctantly. Sion also put his coin in. Will remained the last one hesitating. At night, Will returned to his friends who were worried about him and went to look for him at the factory, but he was not there. Will looked very serious and told them he decided to join Liana's team for training in the room today. Werkner explained that the group training would start in 10 days. Floors 7 to 10 were available, and students would meet level 5 enemies and monsters, giving many points. This was a big chance for students to gather more than 1,000 points at once. The biggest prize was if they could defeat any of the floor guardians. They would win very many points. But Edward entered with a reality check, saying there was a high probability they would die. Last year, 4 students were eaten. He clarified that playing based on heroism was a bad idea and recklessness was forbidden. When the students entered the room, Liana told Colette she was not invited. Colette replied saying if Will went, she would go too. Rosti could not come, but Will was happy he equipped him with many magical tools. The training started safely, and Will put on his combat goggles and was ready. At the same time, inside the room, someone took a secret mission to retrieve something. There was another person there who, with extreme cold-bloodedness, severed a person's head from their body. Then the scene cut to one of Carriot's assistants telling him the training time was set. Carriot, annoyed, said there was no need to disturb him with every small detail, and said he did not want to be a Vander representative even if temporarily. But the assistant spoke strongly and insisted, saying there was no better Vander for this mission. Carriot asked if the king had returned or not, and learned he had not. He said this was not good because the barrier was about to. Back to the room, everyone rushed in and the group training started. Will was determined to prove himself and reach Alfaria. After Liana's request, Wignall used wind magic to push the team forward and descended to the next floor, but he landed them gently with a magical move. They tried to move forward, but found a whole swarm of red ants. Will felt it was his chance because wizards are weak in close combat, but before he could move, Wignall stopped him and asked him if he knew what the Owl's family, Liana's family, was famous for. At this moment, Liana rushed at the monsters with lightning speed and defeated them all with her electric magic. After she finished, Wignall explained that the Owl's family is a family of knights, and Liana is a rare type of wizard who excels in close combat. Liana told the team that competition with other teams for points would be a problem, so they must advance quickly. Will remembered that Professor Werkner asked him once about the most important magic in the room, and when Will didn't know, Werkner explained to him that search magic is the most important magic for wizards to detect enemies and strange things in the room. This is the most important foundation for any wizard. Back to the current time. Will and the others were fighting the rest of the red ants. The others were very fast in eliminating them, while Will was still struggling to do anything. At this moment, he discovered he wouldn't be able to find enemies in time, and also the range of their search spells was much wider than his ability to detect. He started thinking that this way, the enemies would wipe out all the monsters before he could enter any confrontation. Finally, he managed to defeat one of the monsters, but then Wignall used his wind magic and wiped out all the creatures around them. Wignall told Liana immediately, Will is heavier on the team than I expected, and asked Liana why she decided to invite him to the team and what his benefit was, saying that Will wouldn't even serve as a shield. But she defended him and said he hadn't had his chance to prove himself yet, and that he would show his true strength when meeting 5 or more enemies. She admitted she hoped she was right, and said he might be stronger than his current appearance. So okay, even if now he seemed a bit heavy on the team. Julius then absorbed the magical traces of the defeated monsters onto his wand and reminded Liana that he had warned her from the start, saying that someone who doesn't know how to use search magic would tire the team. Will explained that when he absorbs these traces, the wand stores the battle record, and this allows the Academy to verify the killed monsters and calculate the number of points they will earn. When the others prepared to leave, Will lagged a little to collect the items the monsters left behind. Colette told them to wait, but they ignored her and said there was no need to collect items with no value. Will caught up with them quickly after he finished and explained that most people didn't want to work with him because he insisted on collecting the items the monsters left behind, unlike the others. Colette asked Will if he was okay, and he reassured her, saying he was used to this from the beginning and said he would try to help the team in other ways. But he knew he wouldn't be useful against the stronger monsters they might meet inside the towers. They continued their way, and Will couldn't help thinking that his colleagues were very superior, which left him with no chance to prove himself, and he became aware that he would just be a burden. Liana noticed they spent a full day training and suggested taking a break, but Julius was worried about resting inside the dungeon and said he would feel safer if they had protection. Suddenly, Wignall built a wall of fire around them. Colette asked if this was illusion magic, and when she touched the fire, Will confirmed it was real and noticed that just looking at the fire kept the monsters away. Liana Liana then asked Will to distribute the food rations she gave him. When he tried to give Wignall his share, Wignall stopped him from approaching and told him to put it on the ground because he only allows people he deems worthy to touch him. Colette called him out and said he was rude. Wignall said he was superior to everyone because he was an elf, and Liana was the only one he saw as worthy. Will stopped Colette from arguing and told her that elves had special customs and beliefs, and he was not bothered by this. He explained that like dwarves, elves also came from another world, but they were a magical race, and with their magical abilities higher than most wizards. Their queen was also one of the Majavander. After they finished eating, Liana clarified her plan to everyone. She said their #1 priority was eliminating the luminous Naparis, which yields 110 points. It is the unique monster among them and acts as the guardian of the 10th floor. Will thought this was the most points they could earn from a single monster in training. The others said it wasn't strange for wizards to die while facing it, and this was considered the boss of all student training. Liana said she gathered this team specifically to defeat this monster, and was confident they had the ability to do so, and wanted to prove it to the tower. Wignall asked if it was wise to ignore the other monsters and go straight to the boss. Liana clarified she wanted them to conserve their magic so they would be in their best condition when facing it. She added they could deal with the small monsters later, and said they must take the shortest route to the 10th floor. Will noticed he collected only 5 points so far, which was not enough. Although he was nervous about facing the floor guardian, he decided not to back down. Elsewhere, we saw a person seen before named Headless, and his partner asked him if he dealt with the people above. Headless said he dealt with them and they were very annoying to him. Will and the others continued their exploration. When they reached a lower floor, they noticed a large number of monster corpses. Julius thought another team arrived before them, but they ruled that out because they took a shortcut and did not stop at any camp. They were sure no other student could reach there before them. But when they examined the corpses, Will noticed there was no trace of magic. The monsters were shattered by physical strength. Liana then saw Naparis's room ahead of them. The team kept walking there, and Will noticed the dungeon was strangely quiet. They were shocked when they found Naparis's corpse indeed in the room. They all used search skills and sensed faint traces still present. Liana noted that the monster was killed just a while ago. Will thought of Werkner's words before. Search is strong but not omnipotent because it faces difficulty detecting smart traps, and wizards can use concealment magic to avoid it, and some monsters can also escape search completely. Will used his detection skills and sensed the monster above them, so he warned the team quickly. The monster attacked, and Will tried to block the blow, but could not. The monster then hit Wignall with a single blow, sending him flying unconscious. The wizards tried to return fire, but the monster broke the ground beneath them before they could act. They all fell down, and Will grabbed Wignall to protect him while falling. The students above felt the tremor when Will and Wignall fell to the 11th floor. Julius and Scion found themselves on the same floor and were shocked. The 11th floor and above were danger zones where only strong wizards were expected to survive. Liana and Colette also fell to the same floor, but in a different place. Liana noticed the dungeon structure and monster strength were completely different from here on. Colette noticed Liana was bleeding and worried, but Liana reassured her and said she hit her head on a rock during the fall and asked them to stick together because staying alone was very dangerous. Then we saw Will fighting steadily against a giant snake monster. At the same time, Wignall had a dream about a painful past and heard voices mocking him, saying he was useless because he could not create illusion magic. Even Eleanor left him and said he had no value. Suddenly, Wignall woke from the nightmare and noticed the giant snake corpse beside them. Will breathed a sigh of relief when he saw him awake. Wignall was shocked and asked if he killed the monster alone. Will tried to treat Wignall's wounds, but Wignall pulled away and said he did not want anyone touching him. Will calmly told him he did not care if Wignall hated him or even tried to kill him, but he could not leave him like this, so he asked him to at least allow him to treat his hand. Wignall insisted he could manage. After Will gave him the tools, he began bandaging his hand. Will noticed that most of their supplies, including the first aid kit, were ruined. He looked at the ground and saw they still had 3 secondary weapons, counting Rosti's magic items, and also food and drink sufficient for 2 days, assuming the others had their items. But he understood that in the 11th floor conditions, they might barely survive 1 day. So he told Wignall they must find Colette and the others fast, and asked if he was strong enough to move in the dungeon. But Wignall reminded him of standard protocol. If they were late, they must wait for help. Will replied saying that staying without movement would kill them. Help would not arrive in time, especially since the monster they met was still on the 10th floor. At this time, Werkner contacted Professor Elza on the 8th floor while she was fighting a swarm of monsters, and students were running everywhere. Elsa explained they were attacked by a monster pack and their base was destroyed. Werkner asked about the rest of the teachers, and Elsa seriously told him they were killed and beheaded. She also said she received no communication from the 9th floor or below, but expected things there were also as bad as here. Werkner thought the matter was not a coincidence and started wondering what exactly was happening. Edward told him the student group training was canceled and they went out to save the rest of the students still present. At the same time, on the 11th floor, Will and Wignall were wandering inside the maze, and Wignall was using his search magic constantly to find enemies. Will advised him not to overuse the magic because it might consume his magical energy, but Wignall refused to listen and told him there might be an ambush, waiting for them at any moment, unable to control his nerves. Will remained calm and explained to him that distance was the most important thing in search magic. He suggested Wignall use the magic every 140 meters to detect distant enemies, while he would watch for nearby ones and tell Wignall when to use it to conserve his energy. Will assured him that he and Kiki would deal with any ambush and that they must avoid any unnecessary battles. Wignall was surprised by Will's calmness in this dangerous situation. Will explained to him that he had no choice but to rely on training points if he wanted to climb the tower, and that was why he studied the dungeon very well. He said he got stuck about 100 times while exploring, which gave him more experience than Wignall. But Wignall was not happy with these words. Suddenly, Will saw enemies coming at them. 3 pig demons named Gurgisa. They had no choice but to fight because the other path was full of monsters too. Will told Wignall to deal with the pig behind them while he took the 2 in front. Wignall managed to knock down the pig behind them with wind magic, and Will quickly cut the 2 in front easily. Wignall was amazed by Will's speed and understood that Will turned his wisdom into power, which made him feel he was nothing compared to Will. Suddenly, the pig that fell earlier tried to attack again. Wignall didn't find time to react, so he used a fire illusion to buy time. Will advised him not to do that, but it was too late. The monster saw through the illusion and rushed at them. Will intervened quickly and threw a dagger that pierced the pig, then cut him in 2. He explained to Wignall that Gurgisa rely on their sense of smell more than sight, so illusions would not work on them. Wignall laughed bitterly and told himself he was a failure. Will tried to encourage him and told him he would get them next time, but Wignall admitted he was not talented. He was just one of the leftovers who were left behind. Wignall continued and said that of all the elves who came to the academy, he was the only one still there after 6 years. All the other elves went up to the tower, and when they left, they told him only one word: a disgrace to elves. The reason for their hatred was his illusion magic. Elf magic usually gives illusions a tangible form that can be touched, but Wignall's illusions were ordinary, with no texture or real effect. Will did not understand how. Wignall was considered a failure when he was one of the top 3 students in the academy, but the truth was that Wignall, being still there and not ascending to the tower, made him, in some people's eyes, merely the best of the trash that remained. Liana also saw the matter the same way, that no matter your rank in the academy, if you had real talent, you would ascend to the tower eventually. Over the past 6 years, Liana saw many talented people leave her behind and understood she was not strong enough for the tower to notice her. Even her title as #1 in the academy became meaningless because the academy was just a small pond in a vast sea. Only those with true talent could make a name for themselves. Wignall learned this bitter truth long ago from his childhood friend, Eleanor. They grew up together, and Wignall was very attached to her and wanted to stay by her side forever. But one day, while they were training with magic, Eleanor decided to try magic for the first time, even though she had never held a wand before. Her ability was extraordinary, making her a candidate to be the new elf queen and a Magia Vander. They took her away from Wignall. Wignall trained his magic to the maximum degree, but no matter how hard he worked, he remained weaker than his peers. The feeling of constant failure made him resent other wizards like Will, while he suffered from self-doubt. Wignall expected Will to mock him after hearing his story, but Will smiled and told him they had more in common than he imagined. Wignall, sadly, told him he didn't need reassurance, feeling that in his current state, he was just a burden and agreed to be left behind. Will stood up and told him he was determined not to leave anyone behind, reassuring him that he wasn't a burden in his eyes, and that Wignall was a wonderful elf. He promised to protect him until he found the strength to stand and fight again. A little later, Will and Wignall found themselves fighting a group of tough monsters on this floor. Everything they faced so far was level 5 or higher, usually hard to deal with, but Will was cutting through the monsters as if they were air. After the battle, Will returned to Wignall to ask about his condition. Wignall was surprised and asked why Will would risk his life for him, especially when he didn't have to. Will replied, simply that he did it because he saw Wignall as a good person. Suddenly, Will sensed something behind them, and Wignall asked him. Will replied he heard a strange sound. Wignall tried to search with magic but saw nothing nearby because the sound was not coming from a monster directly. The dungeon itself was creating a new monster. monster. Wignall and Will remained focused and ready. Suddenly, bubbles appeared above them. Green liquid started falling, and monsters emerged from it. Will recognized the danger quickly, started moving fast, and launched explosions to kill them before they could attack him. These monsters were called Bulkars, and they were hard to kill. They were immune to all physical attacks and resistant to most magic. The only thing that might affect them was elf illusion magic. There was no escape. Neither Will nor Wignall could run. Will turned to Wignall and asked for his help to face the monsters together. Wignall started crumbling under pressure and said he couldn't do it as his illusion magic had flaws. If he tried, he would mess up and Will might die. But Will remained calm and told him it was okay to make mistakes. Mistakes were part of the path. If they feared trying, they would never advance. Wignall warned that if he failed at the magic, Will might die. But Will said firmly he would not allow himself to die because he had a dream to reach the tower and reunite with Elfaria, so death was not an option. Wignall was shocked by Will's determination and found himself respecting and liking him more because he never let his inferiority complex stop him from advancing. The monsters started their attack. Will charged at them to distract them, but his sword would not hurt them. It was clear that Wignall had to move quickly. He took a deep breath, raised his wand, and cast his spell while scared but determined. But unfortunately, the magic did not affect the Bulkars, and Wignall feared his mistake would cost Will his life. Suddenly, Kiki came quickly and created a protective shield that saved Will at the last moment. Will shouted to Wignall, telling him, "I believe in you." This turned Wignall around completely, and he felt he could reach Eleanor's level. With new determination, Wignall finally managed to use the magic well and created a dense mist that destroyed all the Bulkars. Will was very happy seeing Wignall's magic succeed. When he turned around, he saw Wignall sitting on the ground, formally apologizing for his rude behavior earlier, and admitting that he now understood Will was truly a warrior worthy of respect. Will smiled and said he always respected him, extending his hand. Wignall shook it, confirming their new friendship. After that, Will took out a magic map designed by Rosti. With some blood from the user, it created a detailed map of the area around them. Kiki stayed awake, still remembering the scent of Colette and Sion, and with any trace of them, she would be able to track them. In another part of the maze, Julius and Sion were walking in the dark and twisted corridors. Julius was thirsty and asked Sion if there was any water left. Sion told him there was, but warned him that water was precious here, and they shouldn't waste it, asking him to use ice magic and drink from it. Julius complained, saying they shouldn't waste magic either. They argued a little, then calmed down. Julius used search magic to check for nearby monsters and found nothing, so he relaxed a little. But suddenly, Sion pulled his mantle and dragged him behind him quickly. Julius was surprised and said, "The search found nothing." But Sion reminded him that this magic had flaws and some demons could hide. Sion used heat-sensitive magic and saw several evil sentinels coming. He was surprised. It wasn't just one or two. There were dozens, which was unnatural. Julius thought their appearance was caused by the monster on the 10th floor. Sion stepped forward, determined to face the sentinels, and asked Julius to make clones to distract them. But Julius warned him, saying it was very dangerous and there was no chance to survive against such a large number. But Sion did not give up and explained that the reason for his embarrassment with Will before was that he couldn't defeat an evil sentinel, and now he had to prove to himself that he was strong enough to face them. At the same time, at the main camp on the 7th floor, chaos erupted when evil sentinels launched an attack. The students were in a state of panic, running for their lives. Suddenly, one of the students was about to be destroyed. Professor Edward intervened quickly, used magic to cut off the sentinel's head, saved them, and ordered all students to retreat and gather on the 6th floor. At this time, Werkner arrived just in time on a skyer to take Edward deeper inside the dungeon and save the rest of the students. Thankfully, most students hadn't reached the 8th floor at the time of the attack. However, one team had advanced further. Liana's team had reached the 10th floor, ready to face the boss there. Edward was worried they wouldn't be able to find the team in time due to the vast size of the 10th floor, but Werkner reassured him and told him he knew Liana's team's exact location thanks to Kiki, as Kiki's stone was linked to the one Werkner carried. This allowed him to track them on the 11th floor. We saw Colette and Liana. Colette was leaving small stones on the path so they could retrace their steps if needed. As they walked, Colette asked Liana how much time had passed since they arrived. Liana said 16 hours since they were trapped on the 11th floor, and they had finished all the food and water they had. They tried to sleep whenever they could, but the constantly attacking monsters gave them no chance to rest. Colette said they were still alive, thanks only to Liana's skills, but she knew even Liana had limits and feared she would reach that limit. Liana stopped for a moment, her face covered in blood, and apologized to Colette for everything that happened, saying she was the one who decided to come to the 10th floor, and that decision got them stuck there. But Colette shook her head and told her, "Don't blame yourself. The fault is not yours. The fault lies lies with the monster on this floor that caused all this. Also, Colette said that Liana didn't invite her to come with them. She came on her own. So if anyone deserved to bear responsibility for what happened, it was herself. But she was confident that Will would manage to find their trail and come save them soon. At the same time, someone indeed found the trail, but it wasn't Will. Later, we saw Wignall and Will running in the dungeon, sensing magic near them. When they turned, they found Scion, standing atop a pile of defeated sentinel corpses. Wignall was amazed, unable to believe that Scion could defeat them all alone. But a little later, Julius appeared from behind and said Scion didn't do it alone. He had to sacrifice dozens of his clones to give Scion a chance to win. Will was relieved to see Scion and Julius alive, but immediately noticed that Liana and Colette were not there. When he asked if either of them knew the girl's lot for this location, Julius replied saying he thought they were with Will. Will felt anxious when he discovered that no one knew Liana and Colette's location, and who knew what dangers they might face alone on the 11th floor. Colette saw someone approaching them and was about to call out, but Liana pulled her back, sensing something was wrong. The figure looked like Professor Bruno, but when he got closer, his head suddenly fell off. The head rolled on the ground and wrote a strange message to the girls. After that, the partner of the severed head, Marze, appeared looking clearly annoyed, complaining that the headless man was supposed to deal with everything above and wanting to know how. A few children got past him. The headless man explained that the Duke didn't kill the children immediately, and this created a loophole in the dungeon, allowing them to reach this floor. Marze was not interested in justifications. All that mattered to him was ensuring there were no witnesses to what happened. Colette accused them of killing their professors, the headless man didn't deny it. On the contrary, he announced proudly that he and Mars were villains and had a mission of destruction. This talk wasn't logical to Colette and Liana. They knew the barrier was what prevented the evil, the leaders. So if they wanted to destroy the barrier, they were trying to cause the disaster predicted by legends. The headless man felt he had explained enough, laughed, and said he would take the girls' heads now, starting to attack them with strong magic. Before the attack reached them, Will jumped in and blocked the strike just in time. Will and the others managed to find Colette by following the trail she left. Although he didn't understand everything happening, Will knew he had to move fast without hesitation. He ran at the headless man to buy time for the rest of the team to think of a plan. But before he got close, the headless man hit Will with strong energy, sending him flying backward. The headless man was clearly happy, mocking them and saying how much he wished to add all their heads to his collection. But Marze condemned his partner's actions, pulled him away, and reminded him they still had work to finish. Before leaving, the headless man opened a teleportation gate and summoned the Duke, telling him to deal with the children. A little later, the huge monster from the 10th floor appeared from the gate and cut off any route of escape. The team understood they had no solution but direct confrontation with the monster. But before things got worse, the Duke released an energy beam that almost finished them off. The plan changed immediately. None of them was equipped to face the monster now, so Will quickly ordered everyone to escape into the corridor behind them. But Wignall stayed behind to distract the Duke. He used his illusion magic and formed a huge wall of roots to block the Duke. But the wall failed, and the Duke tore it apart with his massive power. Wignall was now very close to the monster, but Will ran immediately and pulled him out of the way before he was destroyed. The Duke's explosion caused a collapse, separating them from the monster with a pile of huge rubble, providing temporary safety. Colette asked about the monster and why it was so strong. Will thought and said that the Grand Duke was an evil entity from the greater demon class, usually found on the 40th floor. But why was it appearing here? Liana said it might be the work of the evil wizards they met earlier. But the most important thing now was that the Duke might attack them again, and he asked all the demons on the floor to attack them. The chances of survival were weak, and Julius began to collapse from terror. Liana felt responsible and blamed herself because she led them to this place. They were tired, exhausted, standing in a dangerous spot with limited resources. Julius had every right to be scared, but at the peak of tension, Will spoke up and said they must fight back, because if they didn't change, they wouldn't survive. Demons controlled several floors, so sneaking was very difficult. But if they could defeat the Duke, the demons would be thrown into chaos, giving them the only chance to escape. Julius initially laughed and called Will's plan crazy, doubting they could defeat the Duke alone. But he insisted, said he had a plan, and clarified he wouldn't force anyone to join if they didn't want to. But Julius still refused. Wignall said he trusted Will's abilities, and Colette and Scion agreed too, even though Scion still didn't like him. Wignall looked at Liana and said she must trust Will. She agreed and decided to appoint him as the team leader. Everyone agreed to follow him. Julius was still skeptical, but Will told him they wouldn't be able to do it if he was alone. He needed Julius's power. Julius, with his skill in ice magic, was the only one who could mimic Elfaria's ancient magic, and Will intended to teach him a secret technique from her. The team started executing Will's plan. Will ran across the floor to lure the Duke behind him, and the Duke got closer. Julius, standing on the edge, began casting the spell. The Duke tried to hit him, but it was a strike on a clone. More clones appeared, all completing the spell. Will explained to them that this was the secret of Elfaria's magic. The clones complemented each other. If one was destroyed, it helped them complete the difficult spell. Julius was very exhausted, and when all the clones were destroyed, he had to continue alone. Will ordered the others to do anything to delay the Duke. Colette, Wignall, and Scion used their magic, but they were barely having an effect. Will told them the Duke's wings could not be broken, but the important thing was to stall his attack a bit. Will ran to hit the monster's wing and succeeded slightly, but was pushed away. He realized attacks with magic and weapons wouldn't affect much. The priority now was to act as bait until Julius completed the spell. The team worked together with no choice but to distract the Duke. Finally, Julius finished the spell, and massive ice arrows were fired at the monster. Julius was very exhausted, but even after the strongest magic, the monster was only injured. Will had expected this, but it weakened the Duke enough for Lyanna to get a chance to strike him. Lyanna ran quickly across the field and tried to land the final blow, but a barrier stopped her. The Duke had an automatic defense, likely from the evil wizards. This delay wasted Lyanna's chance, and the Duke attacked. Will ran and pulled Lyanna away from danger. As they ran, they couldn't avoid all the Duke's explosions. Will asked Colette to create a shield, and she was just in time, but in the chaos, Will's glasses broke. Before he could act, a beam came straight at him. At the same time, Werkner and Edward were running to the 11th floor to save the students. Werkner couldn't believe the situation. A Grand Duke appearing on this floor was unbelievable. Despite this, they couldn't do anything until they arrived. They had to hope the students could hold out a bit in the battle. Will was hit by the Duke's beam, but Wignall acted quickly and used magic to catch Will and Lyanna. The others ran to check on them because she said she was fine, but she was concerned about Will, who took half the attack. Will, clearly confused, was shocked more than anything because the protective glasses Elfaria gave him were now broken. Then, when the Grand Duke started breaking free from the freezing spell Julius cast, Scion suggested they prepare for a second attack, but Lyanna, seeing the danger coming, told everyone they must escape immediately. She asked them to take Will and go, while she stayed to stop the monster as much as she could. Although she knew this sacrifice would give them little time, she was ready to sacrifice her life so the others would survive. Colette tried to stop her, but Lyanna, filled with guilt because she couldn't defeat the Duke earlier, felt this was her responsibility. Then Wignall stood beside Lyanna and said he would stay and fight too. Aside from Lyanna, Will was the only one Wignall truly respected, and so he wanted to help protect him. So together, they attacked the Duke, and Lyanna tried to get close to strike him. Wignall used his magic to restrict and bind the Duke, exposing his heart. But before Lyanna could strike, the Duke broke free with terrible power and dealt her a strong blow that sent her backward. The sight of the Duke defeating Lyanna and Wignall increased Scion's despair. He was paralyzed with fear, convinced that Lyanna and Wignall would die, and that the only solution before him was to escape and save himself. As he tried to think rationally, suddenly Will appeared, looking panicked without his glasses. Fear controlled Will, and he couldn't stop his legs from shaking. In a desperate plea, he asked Scion to punch him in the face so the shock would snap him out of the panic. Scion got angry seeing Will trembling like that. This man was the one who gave the team hope, who made them fight the Grand Duke, and now he was like a scared puppy. So Scion started hitting Will, blaming him for everything going wrong. Will didn't try to resist at all, but in the end, Will managed. Thanked Scion for the hit because it helped him snap out of the panic. Scion was shocked to see Will smiling after, being scared to death just moments ago. But Will just grabbed his sword and told Colette to watch Kiki as he would return to the battle. Scion could not comprehend how Will bounced back so quickly. Colette explained to him that Will was still afraid, but fights despite the fear like he always does. Scion was skeptical because he had never seen Will afraid before, but he did not know how sword fighting differs from a wizard. Being a wizard, Scion can stay back and attack from a distance, but Will must get close to enemies and risk his life against larger and stronger creatures. So who wouldn't be scared in this situation? And what really scares Will more than anything is the idea of running away or losing the people he loves, and that is what makes him continue fighting. Colette then told Scion she would join Will in the battle, which made Scion feel ashamed because he thought of abandoning the team. At that time, the monster attacked Will. He tried to find a way to defeat it, but its defenses were solid and very fast, making it hard to hit. So the only chance was cutting the Duke's wings. Colette launched a barrage of rocks to distract him, and although Lyanna and Wignall were incapacitated, the responsibility fell on Will to complete the final strike. The Duke started attacking with a violent sequence, and Will prepared to face it directly, but without Kiki's shield, any direct hit could be fatal. But since he had seen this attack before, Will was able to dodge all the strikes with professional precision, and when the dust settled, Will flew into the air heading for the Duke. Colette knew exactly what Will wanted to do, so she threw all her energy into crafting the strongest sword for him, and with this sword, Will managed to cut one wing off the Duke. Now the Duke could no longer defend himself. All they needed was the final strike. Luckily, Luckily, Scion was there to complete the mission. He rode his sentinel, creating a perfect distraction while charging an advanced spell. When he got close enough, Scion launched a fire spell at point-blank range, but even that was not enough to finish the Duke. If a wand and a sword could not kill the monster, Will didn't know what to do. Suddenly, a piece of ice fell from the ceiling from Rosti. Will didn't know Rosti was there, but the ice triggered something in his memory. We return to a scene from Will's childhood in his mother's lap. She always believed that Will would one day unite the power of the wand and the sword. Suddenly, something strange happened to Will. He ran, grabbed his sword, and asked Scion to send him his magic. Scion executed immediately. Will hit the magic with the sword, and the energy went directly into the blade. Now, with the power glowing inside his heart, he felt no one could stop him. With a single precise strike, he cut the Grand Duke in two and finished off the monster. Everyone was shocked by what happened, and Will fell to his knees, exhausted very much. Even he himself did not understand what happened, and the sword returned to its normal shape. Wignall was very happy that he defeated the Duke, but he did not enjoy the moment long because they were surrounded afterwards by armies of evil, sentinels. Wignall quickly understood they came to the sound of the Grand Duke's death, and Lyanna noticed this was very dangerous because they had no power left to fight with. While the professors were running to help the students, one of the sentinels attacked Julius, and Werkner understood they would not be able to reach in time. But suddenly, a powerful spell destroyed all the sentinels in the area. Will recognized this spell as advanced annihilation magic and wondered who cast it. All eyes turned to a group of people, and Scion was shocked when he saw the wand their leader was carrying. When the leader revealed his face, Werkner and Edward were very shocked by his identity. This was Aaron Masterius, the former king of Magiavander. Will said he was the owner of the strongest magic wand. Aaron announced he granted the blessing of light to those standing against the darkness in the maze and thanked them for their courage. Even Wignall, who is an elf, showed his respect. All eyes turned to Aaron, but Will focused on the small man who stood beside him. The man approached Will and told him in amazement, "I am surprised the sword is still alive," and asked for his name. When Will introduced himself, the man introduced himself as Finn and revealed his face. Afterward, we saw the men, who were suspicious from earlier, happy they arrived in time to collect their things. Marze held a sword and said they would not have been able to take it if they were being chased, and added he preferred not to meet them again. Headless said they finished their mission and now could celebrate with a party from hell. In the end, the chaotic events in the student training ended. It left behind 11 dead, all professors from the academy. Thanks to the speed of the professors, who survived, no student was killed. Reports revealed arrest warrants for the criminals, but there was no real lead so far. Now, the survivors were resting because the academy closed temporarily. We also saw Will and his friends resting in a medical room. Scion was still confused and asked who those suspicious people were. Wignall also did not know and said how crazy they must be to kill so many professors like that. Lyanna, still in disbelief, called out for Professor Bruno and the others who died. Julius was clearly shocked, thinking what would have happened if Aaron hadn't arrived at the right time. Lyanna, she told them they must be grateful because they survived. She admitted that when she formed this team, it was to get recognition from the tower, but suddenly discovered she had a better eye for people than she thought. She smiled and thanked everyone before her stomach, made a loud noise from hunger, which ruined the touching moment. Colette laughed and gave Lyanna an apple, which she took with thanks and immediately asked for more. Colette handed her one after another until Lyanna finished, all except one. Colette joked with her, saying she didn't know Lyanna was this hungry. Lyanna got shy and denied it, explaining that her magic consumes a lot of physical and magical energy, and that was why she needed to eat more than any ordinary wizard. She insisted she wasn't just a knight who loved food and hoped the others wouldn't think less of her. But everyone found it hard to believe, and Colette nicknamed her the Hungry Knight. Scion didn't believe Miss Perfect had such a big appetite. Wignall also said it was hard to believe when he first learned about it. Will laughed and said he considered himself a big eater, but even he couldn't match Lyanna's appetite. Lyanna returned to the main topic, and Colette, while peeling the last apple, praised Will for his judgment and courage in the last battle and told them they would have been destroyed without him. Will, clearly embarrassed by the praise, said, "No, we survived only because we worked together." Julius, confessing, told them they were also on the verge of death because of Will's bold plan. He admitted that at one point he was very scared and couldn't stop his legs from shaking, adding that Will's plan put a huge burden on him and was very reckless. But before he could finish, Colette put the apple in his mouth, almost choking him to shut him up. Scion then asked Will about the mysterious power he used in the fight. Colette, still surprised, said it was so amazing she was holding her breath. Lyanna said Will's sword contained the spell, although Wignall was sure it wasn't just magic. Lyanna wasn't sure and asked aloud, "Can we call it magic at all?" Julius, after managing to speak again, said Will should have told them about this power before, because its secrecy could have put them in danger. But before he could finish, Kiki, annoyed by Julius, scratched him with her claws. Scion asked Will to answer. Will, a bit confused, admitted he didn't know he had this power and explained his mind went completely blank at the moment it happened. Colette suggested maybe the professors knew something about it. Liana agreed, and said they must ask because this felt like something supernatural, not just ordinary magic. Will then remembered the small boy Finn from the exploration team and wondered who he was. Wignall quickly understood he was talking about the support and suggested Finn might be from the Finn tribe. Liana, remembering, said she read about them in the House Anzus books. She explained that, although the Finn tribe cannot use magic, they gathered vast knowledge about dungeons over generations. They have a contract with the tower since the time of the witch queen and work as guides for dungeon exploration. People say it is impossible for anyone to go deeper into the maze without their help. Then we see Rosti standing outside the room listening to the conversation happening inside. Will was still thinking about Finn, thinking about the strange feeling he felt when he met him for the first time. A little later, we see Finn meeting Cauldron. Cauldron greeted him and told him it had been a long time since they last saw him and asked how far he went into the maze this time. Finn replied he reached the 49th floor and said also that Aaron pushed him forward to his maximum limit. Finn then showed her a sword they brought from the maze, named the Mage Slayer, and said they found it after encountering a group of bad people on the 40th floor. The confrontation was violent, and they lost 20 powerful spells during the battle. The people they fought were likely conducting experiments there. Cauldron listened well and understood he was suggesting someone made this weapon by gathering rare materials, some found only in the deepest levels. Finn also revealed that Aaron assigned him to go back again to do another scan, but for now, he left the analysis of the weapon to Cauldron to handle. Cauldron apologized for putting a heavy burden on him and thought about there being bad people working behind the scenes. Finn asked her to be careful before they changed the subject. Then he asked her directly why she didn't tell him about Will, saying that while wands fell under her responsibility, swords were his domain. Cauldron replied telling him Will was a student in her academy, and although he was obsessed with wands the most, his real goal was to climb the tower and reach the Magia Vander. Finn looked surprised and admitted he never heard of a sword wanting to be a magic wand. Cauldron agreed. It was very strange, but she saw that this unprecedented situation might birth something new and influential. Finn, hearing this, agreed to let her handle it for now, but as he left, he added with a sly smile that he would also start interfering in Will's affairs from now on. Then we return to Will focusing on sword training. Colette couldn't believe he was training this early. She told him the rest of the people were still tired and couldn't move, but he answered her that he couldn't sit still. He admitted there were still many things he didn't understand, but he had to continue because there was a place he was determined to reach. Julius looked at him and asked, "What is this body? How does it work?" and jokingly said maybe he was secretly a dwarf. Wignall looked at him and gave him a look, warning him not to call Will a dwarf, especially since he was a loyal friend to dwarves and a warrior worthy of respect. Liana also intervened and said that Will's simplicity and persistence were what made him strong. Suddenly, Scion screamed at Will, saying he wanted to fight him. Will jumped immediately, hurting his injured body. Colette quickly scolded him and told him not to even think about fighting in his condition. But Scion was stubborn and said if he could move, he could too. Will, however, told him to rest and focus on healing, but Scion was not willing to back down and reminded him that Will promised they would fight after the Grand Magic Games, telling him he must keep his promise and that whoever couldn't defeat him had no chance to reach the tower. Will reluctantly agreed to the fight. Scion threw spells at him, but Will dodged them all or countered them skillfully. Scion continued attacking and refused to back down, but suddenly Professor Werkner passed by and noticed the unauthorized fight. The moment the students saw him, they ran and disappeared quickly, while Iris watched Will from afar. 2 months passed since the chaos of the general student training, and students finally returned to classrooms. Professor Werkner spoke to them and admitted that maybe some of them still felt anxious after what happened, but he emphasized that studies must continue. He reminded them that the school year was nearly over and they were ready for final exams. He gave them the exam papers, and as Will took his paper, his thoughts went to Elfaria, knowing that after he graduated from the academy, he would have a chance to see her again. And this was the end of our story today. Before we finish our story, do not forget to like, share, and comment on the video, because this is what encourages us to continue. If you are new to our channel, subscribe and activate the bell button to receive everything new. See you in a new video, my friends.